Before we get started, please like and subscribe. Let me know where you're watching from, and you can support the channel by clicking thanks or joining. Ethan Caldwell had never been the kind of man who feared the dark. He grew up in the countryside of Vermont, where the nights were long and the silence even longer. But after he moved into his new apartment on Brookline Avenue, the darkness felt heavier, more deliberate, like it was waiting for him to close his eyes so it could move closer. The old building creaked at every hour, and the cold draft that crawled through the floorboards seemed to whisper his name. He tried to ignore it at first, but the unease thickened as the days went by. It began the night he woke up at exactly 2:33 a.m. He did not know why. His eyes snapped open as if something had pulled him from sleep. He lay still, listening. The apartment was silent. Then he heard it, a soft scrape from under the bed, not a settling sound, not a mouse or shifting wood. It was intentional, careful, like fingertips dragging across the floor. Ethan held his breath. The sound came again, closer to the edge of the mattress. He could feel the vibration through the frame, a faint tremor that made the hairs on his arms rise. He turned on the bedside lamp, but the light flickered weakly, as though resisting the darkness instead of cutting through it. He climbed out of bed slowly, heart pounding in his throat. He knelt and lifted the edge of the blanket. Nothing, only shadows. He exhaled shakily, telling himself he had imagined it. But the moment he crawled back into bed, the scraping returned. This time louder, this time paired with a low breathing that did not belong to him. Ethan froze. Each breath from under the bed was slow and deep, as if something enormous hid beneath him. He wanted to run, but terror glued him to the sheets. After what felt like hours, the breathing stopped. Silence swallowed the room. Eventually, exhaustion pulled him back into a restless sleep. The next morning, he tried to convince himself it was just his mind playing tricks. He had been working long shifts. Stress could make anyone imagine things. But when he looked at the floor beside the bed, he saw marks, thin, parallel scratches that had not been there before. He crouched down to examine them, but the moment his fingers touched the grooves, a cold pulse shot up his arm. He jerked back in alarm. The scratches seemed almost fresh, as if something had carved them in the night. That evening, he double-checked the locks on the doors and windows. He left the lights on in every room. He played soft music to drown out the silence. But when sleep finally overtook him, his eyes opened again at 2:33 a.m. The room was darker than before. The lamp he had left on was now off, though he clearly remembered turning it on. His phone on the nightstand flickered, the screen glowing faintly like a dying firefly. Then it came, the scrape, the slow drag, the whisper of movement beneath the bed. Ethan slowly reached for his phone to turn on the flashlight, but the device shut off completely, plunging him into pitch black. He felt something shift the mattress, something pressed upward from below, lifting it by a fraction of an inch. Ethan bolted upright, heart thundering against his ribs. The pressure stopped. The darkness pressed closer. He could smell something damp and earthy rising from beneath him, a scent like old soil mixed with decaying wood. He forced himself to move. With trembling hands, he clicked the lamp switch. Nothing! He clicked again. Still nothing. He felt trapped in a nightmare that refused to follow the rules of the waking world. Then a voice rose from under the bed, a soft voice. A childlike whisper. Ethan, he did not breathe. He did not move. He felt every drop of blood in his body turn cold. Ethan, I am waiting. He flung himself out of bed, stumbling backward into the wall. His legs shook violently. The whispering stopped. Then came a thump from under the bed, as if something large had shifted its weight. He did not dare approach. Instead, he ran to the hallway and turned on every light he could reach. He paced back and forth until dawn. When the sun rose, he returned to the bedroom cautiously. He lifted the blanket again, only emptiness, but the smell remained. And now the scratches had multiplied. Deep, jagged marks ran along the floorboards beneath the frame, as if claws had raked through the wood. He knew he needed help. He called his friend Marcus, a paranormal investigator who treated strange stories with an open mind. Marcus arrived that afternoon, carrying equipment Ethan had never seen before. EMF meters, thermal scanners, audio recorders. They spent hours testing the apartment. At first, everything was normal. But when Marcus approached the bed, the temperature dropped instantly. Frost formed along the metal bed frame. The thermal camera showed a void where the floor should have been. A cold, black absence that swallowed the heat around it. Marcus frowned deeply. Something is here, something old. Ethan asked what it wanted, but Marcus shook his head. That night, Marcus insisted on staying with Ethan. They set up cameras and microphones around the room. Ethan felt slightly safer knowing he was not alone. They talked quietly until sleep pulled at their eyes. They drifted off sometime after midnight. At 2:33 a.m., the cameras flickered. The room sank into silence. Then the scraping began, not the slow drag of before. This time it was frantic, aggressive. The bed shook violently, as if something underneath thrashed against the frame. Marcus leaped up and grabbed his recorder. Ethan stood frozen in terror. The room filled with the sound of breathing, but it was no longer slow or human-like. It was guttural, snarling, growing louder with each second. The bed lifted off the floor, suspended for a brief moment, before crashing down with a deafening bang. Both men stumbled back. A dark shape curled beneath the frame, shifting like a mass of shadows trying to take form. Marcus shouted for Ethan to get out. Ethan ran to the door, but it slammed shut in his face with such force the walls shook. Then, from beneath the bed, came the whisper again. Ethan, do not leave. You heard me. I am waiting. Darkness crawled from beneath the bed, snaking across the floor like tendrils searching for him, and the clock beside him blinked. 2:33 a.m. The exact moment everything changed. Ethan spent the following morning pacing the apartment in a haze of exhaustion and dread. Marcus sat silently at the kitchen table, reviewing the distorted audio clips from the night before. Neither spoke for several minutes. A heavy pressure filled the apartment, as though the air itself held its breath, waiting for them to acknowledge the truth neither wanted to face. Ethan kept glancing down the hallway toward the bedroom door, which he had closed firmly behind him. Even from here, he felt the cold radiating from it like a warning. Marcus finally exhaled. and set the recorder down. Whatever is under your bed is not residual energy. It is not a spirit passing through. It is intelligent, and it is aware of you. His words fell like stones into the silence. Ethan swallowed hard. He felt like a hunted man. Every memory of the whisper calling his name kept replaying in his mind. They decided to leave the apartment for a few hours. The sunlight felt surreal and distant, like it belonged to another world entirely. Ethan hoped that distance might weaken the thing in the dark. But even as he walked the busy streets, he felt watched. At times, he swore he saw shadows shifting in the corner of his vision. He could not ignore the feeling that something followed him like a cold thread tugging from underneath the floorboards of his life. Marcus suggested gathering more equipment. He drove to his office and returned with 2 large cases filled with motion sensors, infrared lines, frequency detectors, and a high-accuracy night vision camera. They spent the afternoon setting everything up around the bedroom. Marcus calibrated each device with a seriousness that made Ethan even more anxious. The apartment hummed with tension as the sun dipped behind the buildings, casting long shadows across the living room. By evening, Ethan felt the familiar panic of nightfall creeping over him. His stomach churned. The memory of the whisper pulsed in his chest like a bruise. Marcus tried to reassure him, but his voice carried a strain that betrayed his own fear. The bedroom looked like a small command center by the time they finished, with equipment arranged in neat lines pointing toward the bed like a silent army of electronic guardians. When the clock neared midnight, they sat together on the couch, pretending to watch television. Though neither absorbed anything on the screen, Ethan felt a cold draft trailing through the apartment, drifting from room to room, as though searching. He hugged his arms tightly around himself. Marcus kept glancing toward the hallway, as if expecting the darkness to spill out. Eventually, fatigue pulled at their eyes again. They agreed to rest, but this time they slept in the living room instead of the bedroom. The lights remained on. Marcus placed 2 cameras facing the hallway and set a motion sensor near the bedroom door. Ethan lay awake longer than he realized, listening to the silence. Every sound felt sharp. Every shadow felt too deep. He drifted into uneasy sleep sometime after 1. Minutes or hours later, he jolted awake in darkness so complete it felt like being submerged underwater. His first thought was that the power had gone out. His second was terror. The lights had been on when he closed his eyes. He sat up quickly, heart pounding against his ribs. Marcus was still beside him asleep, but his brow was furrowed as though trapped in a nightmare. Ethan turned slowly toward the hallway. Faint breathing echoed from the end of it. Not human, not gentle. It vibrated low and steady like something massive trying to remain quiet. He reached out and shook Marcus urgently. Marcus stirred half-conscious until he too heard it. They exchanged a silent look full of dread. Then the motion sensor beeped softly. A single red light blinked in the dark. Something was moving near the bedroom. Marcus scrambled to grab his flashlight and camera. Ethan followed. though his legs felt weak and unsteady. The hallway stretched before them like a tunnel, swallowing the faintest glint of light. The closer they came to the bedroom door, the colder the air became. Frost formed along the doorknob, shimmering faintly in the beam of the flashlight. Marcus whispered, "They never get this cold unless something is fully manifesting." Ethan did not want to open the door. His hand trembled violently as he reached for it. Before he touched the knob, a deep thud came from inside the room. Then another, as if something huge bumped against the bed frame from below. Marcus pushed the door slowly. The hinges creaked in protest. The bedroom was pitch black, though the lights had been left on earlier. Every bulb had failed again. As the flashlight beam swept across the room, Ethan felt bile rise in his throat. The bed was lifted slightly off the floor, resting crooked as if balanced on something beneath it. The blankets drooped like a curtain hiding a stage where something waited to perform. A low growl resonated from under the frame. Not animal, not human, a sound that should not exist in the world. Ethan stumbled back. The growl deepened as the mattress shifted slowly. Then a voice rose from beneath it, a whisper so faint he could almost convince himself he imagined it. "You left me, Ethan. Why did you leave?" The flashlight flickered. Ethan froze, unable to speak. His breath stuttered painfully. Marcus moved forward, aiming the camera toward the bed. The thermal overlay on the lens showed a swirling void under the frame, darker than anything Ethan had ever seen. No heat signature, no outline, just an impossible absence chewing through the temperature of the room. Marcus whispered, "We need to capture whatever is happening inside. There is an opening forming. It may not be physical, it might be dimensional." Ethan did not want to know what dimension could possibly reach under his bed at 2:33 a.m. Suddenly, the mattress slammed upward. Both men jumped. The blanket spilled off the bed, revealing nothing beneath but the hollow space. Yet the growl now filled the entire room, shaking the walls. Darkness began pooling on the floor, gathering like liquid ink. Ethan felt something cold wrap around his ankle. Invisible, tight. He screamed and kicked instinctively. Marcus lunged to pull him back. The unseen grip tightened, dragging Ethan toward the bed. His fingernails scraped against the floor as he fought to stay upright. The darkness coiled further around him, pulling with unnatural strength. Marcus grabbed Ethan by the arms, shouting, "Fight it! Do not let it pull you under." Ethan felt the grip burning cold like frostbite, searing into his skin. He kicked wildly. Somehow the grip weakened just enough for Marcus to haul him backward. Ethan collapsed, panting uncontrollably. The darkness flowed back under the bed like a retreating tide. Then came the whisper again, closer, more deliberate. "You cannot run at 2:33 a.m. You belong to the moment." The clock on the nightstand flickered to life, though it had been dead earlier. The numbers blinked, mocking them. 2:33 a.m. exactly. In that moment, Ethan understood something horrifying. The entity was not tied to the apartment. It was tied to time itself, and every night, at the same exact minute, it would come for him no matter where he hid. Ethan did not sleep again after the entity retreated beneath the frame. He and Marcus locked themselves in the living room, keeping every light blazing. though the brightness did little to ease the dread settling in their bones. The cold around Ethan's ankle lingered long after the invisible grip released him, like frost burned into the skin. He sat trembling, staring at the hallway, expecting at any moment to see darkness spill across the floor and drag him back toward the bed. Marcus stayed beside him, reviewing the footage repeatedly, though each time he watched it, his face grew more pale. The cameras showed distortion, unnatural bending of shapes and frames that flickered out as though eaten by something unseen. Morning finally arrived, but daylight felt thin and fragile. Ethan wrapped a blanket around himself and tried to calm his racing thoughts. Marcus insisted they leave the apartment entirely. Ethan agreed, though every step away from the bedroom felt like pulling away from a gravity that wanted him back. Even outside beneath the wide sky, he sensed the entity's attention like a thread kept taut between him and the bed. Marcus noticed his unease and reassured him that daylight weakened most phenomena, yet even he did not sound convinced. They spent hours at a nearby cafe where Marcus outlined everything he knew about temporal hauntings. Most entities were tied to locations, but some were bound to hours, specific windows of time that acted like doorways. If something reached for Ethan at 2:33 a.m., it meant that minute was its opening and its anchor. Ethan listened with growing dread. The idea that no place could protect him if the clock struck that time terrified him more than the night itself. Marcus proposed a plan to study the entity more carefully. They needed to understand what it wanted and why it called Ethan by name. The fact it spoke clearly meant intelligence. The fact it whispered meant intent. The fact it followed patterns meant hunger. Ethan shivered at the thought. He did not want to wait for another night, but he knew he had no choice. The hour would arrive again, whether he hid or ran, and the entity would find him. When they returned to the apartment, the air felt heavier than before. The shadows along the walls looked longer, the windows dimmer. Ethan refused to go near the bedroom, so Marcus went inside alone to check the equipment. He emerged minutes later with a shaken expression. The bed was lower than before, pressed nearly flush with the floor, as if something beneath it settled deeper. The temperature had dropped again, and the scratches along the floorboards now formed patterns, not random lines. Shapes, symbols Ethan did not recognize. Marcus photographed them with trembling hands. They spent the afternoon researching ancient sigils and recordings of anomalous voices, but nothing matched. The closest Marcus found were accounts of entities that lived in thresholds between minutes, creatures that hunted during specific slices of time when their realm brushed against the physical world. If one latched onto a person, it would return night after night until the connection was complete. Marcus refused to say what complete meant. Ethan already feared he knew. As twilight descended, Ethan's chest tightened. Nightfall meant the approach of that minute again. He felt his heartbeat sync with the steady tick of the wall clock, as though something inside him counted down. Marcus noticed his panic and guided him through breathing exercises, but nothing steadied him. The fear was too deep, too too rooted in the memory of cold tendrils pulling at him. When midnight arrived, they prepared everything. Cameras lined the hallway. Motion sensors blinked in steady intervals. Marcus set up a direct audio recorder pointed at the bed and double-checked every cable. Ethan sat on the couch, gripping a flashlight like a lifeline, though he doubted light would help against whatever awaited. They both remained fully awake, listening to the house creak and shift, as if stretching before the hour arrived. At 2:20 a.m., the temperature dropped sharply. Their breath fogged. The lights dimmed. Marcus checked the equipment and whispered, "It is early tonight." Ethan's heart pounded faster. He felt a pressure building behind his ribs, as though the entity touched his soul through the thinning veil. At 2:28 a.m., they heard the first sound, a faint scrape sliding across the floor of the bedroom, then another closer, then a slow dragging like something heavy shifting its weight. Marcus gripped his camera ready. Ethan stayed behind him, muscles tensed with dread. A boom rattled the apartment. The bedroom door trembled on its hinges. Darkness pooled along the floor like it was seeping from beneath the frame. The lights flickered violently and then failed completely. They were plunged into cold, silent black. Marcus whispered, "Stay behind me. Keep your eyes open." Ethan nodded, though his body shook uncontrollably. Another sound rose from the bedroom, breathing. Deep, slow, monstrous breathing that reverberated through the hallway. Then the whisper drifted out like a poisonous wind. "Ethan, come back." Marcus raised the camera, and the night vision lens illuminated the hallway in a ghostly green glow. Shadows writhed on the floor. Tendrils stretched from beneath the bedroom door, reaching outward with fluid, unnatural movement. Ethan stepped back, gripping the wall for support. One tendril brushed the hallway tile, leaving frost in its wake. The bedroom door burst open with a violent crack. The bed inside lifted several inches off the ground, bending in the center as though something enormous pressed upward. The whisper grew louder, more insistent. "Come, it is time." Marcus stepped forward, capturing everything, though Ethan could hear his breath quickening with fear. The dark tendrils flowed like smoke, yet moved with purpose, curling toward Ethan. He stumbled backward, trying to outrun the creeping cold. Marcus yelled, "Run!" But the hallway behind them darkened instantly, as though the entity blocked every exit. The clock on the wall flickered to life, glowing the number 2:33 a.m. The world held still. The air froze. Ethan felt his heartbeat stop for a fraction of a second. The entity surged forward. Darkness rushed from the bedroom like a wave collapsing through the hallway. It grabbed his ankle again, but this time the grip was stronger, unyielding. Ethan screamed, falling hard as the entity dragged him across the floor. Marcus lunged, grabbing his arms once more, shouting, "Don't let it have you." Ethan clawed at the ground, fighting the pull. The darkness consumed the hallway, dragging him closer to the bedroom. The air filled with the whisper repeating his name over and over, growing louder until it became a roar. Then the bed collapsed downward, as though forming a tunnel beneath it. Ethan saw only blackness beneath the frame, an impossible impossible void swirling like a storm. Marcus yelled for him to hold on, but the pull intensified, trying to drag Ethan into the opening. He felt the world around him distort, the walls bending, the air vibrating. The void reached up like a monstrous mouth, opening to swallow him whole. And then everything stopped. The pull vanished. The darkness receded instantly like a tide reversing. Ethan collapsed, gasping. Marcus dragged him away from the room, closing the door with shaking hands. The apartment returned to silence, though the cold remained. Ethan lay on the floor, trembling, unable to move. Marcus stared at the door, whispering, "We are running out of time. Whatever is beneath that bed is growing stronger, and it is not going to stop until it takes you fully into its hour." Ethan spent the next hours sitting against the living room wall, unable to stop shaking. His ankle throbbed where the darkness had wrapped around him, leaving a faint discoloration beneath the skin, like bruises formed by fingers that did not exist. Marcus hovered nearby, pacing restlessly, while reviewing the footage again and again, hoping to find a clue or weakness in the entity's behavior. But nothing in the recordings offered help. Every piece of evidence only confirmed the same dreadful truth. The thing under the bed was growing stronger. Every night at 2:33 a.m., it pushed further into their world, as though feeding on Ethan's fear and presence. By noon, Marcus insisted Ethan see the bruising on his ankle. When he examined it closely, he froze. The dark imprint was not random. It formed a curved pattern resembling part of the sigils scratched into the bedroom floor. Ethan recoiled instantly, pulling his leg away. Marcus rubbed his face with shaking hands, whispering, "It marked you." Ethan felt nausea churn inside him. The sigils were not simply symbols. They were a language, a claim. Marcus proposed leaving the apartment for good, but the idea filled Ethan with another kind of fear. If the entity was tied to the time rather than the location, then leaving would not save him. Running would only mean facing the hour alone, somewhere unfamiliar without the equipment or Marcus's help. He had seen how powerful the entity's pull was. If it caught him without resistance, he doubted he could survive another encounter. Instead, Marcus suggested contacting a specialist, someone who dealt with temporal phenomena. His name was Dr. Rowan Hawthorne, a reclusive researcher rumored to study dimensional breaches. Ethan had never heard of him, but Marcus insisted he was their best hope. They reached out through a secure channel and waited for a response. Hours passed in a slow, tense crawl. Ethan tried to stay awake, even though he had not slept in more than a day. Each time he blinked, he feared waking again in the darkness of the hour. Evening drew near, bringing the creeping sense of dread with it. The shadows in the apartment stretched unnaturally, as if reaching toward Ethan. He glanced nervously at the bedroom door, which remained closed. He felt the entity on the other side like a presence pressing gently against the threshold, testing the barrier. Marcus tried to distract him by discussing defensive strategies, but Ethan could barely focus. His mind kept replaying the moment the darkness almost pulled him under. Finally, Marcus's device pinged. Dr. Hawthorne had responded. The message was brief and unsettling. Do not attempt to directly confront it. The hour is a fracture. Prepare containment measures. I am coming. Ethan felt a glimmer of hope, though it was fragile and thin. Marcus immediately began preparing for Hawthorne's arrival. They moved furniture, cleared the living room floor, and set up additional sensors to track atmospheric changes. Ethan helped as best he could, though exhaustion made his limbs heavy. As nightfall deepened, the air in the apartment thickened, becoming heavier with every passing minute. By midnight, the tension had become suffocating. Ethan kept checking the clock, his heart pounding harder with every tick. Marcus instructed him to stay in the living room for the night while he monitored the bedroom from the hallway. The entity always manifested strongest near the bed, but there was no guarantee it would stay confined to the room forever. If Hawthorne was correct, the fracture could widen, allowing the entity to spill into the rest of the apartment. At 2:25 a.m., the temperature plummeted so suddenly, Ethan's breath crystallized into fog. The lights flickered, casting disjointed shadows along the walls. Marcus grabbed his equipment and positioned himself between Ethan and the hallway. They waited in tense silence, listening for the first sound. It arrived moments later, a faint rhythmic tapping coming from beneath the bedroom floor. Not random, intentional, like knuckles knocking from another world. Ethan's entire body tensed. The tapping grew faster, becoming a hollow drumming that made the floor vibrate. Under their feet, Marcus whispered, "It is preparing itself." Ethan swallowed hard, unable to speak. At 2:30 a.m., the hallway lights flickered violently, then burst with sharp pops, sending sparks across the floor. Darkness swallowed the hall. An invisible wind rushed from the bedroom, carrying with it the scent of cold earth and rotting wood. Ethan felt the marks on his ankle burn, suddenly pulsing like a heartbeat. He clenched his teeth, trying not to scream. The whisper came next, a low rumbling that echoed through the apartment, vibrating through the walls and floor. "Ethan, you are late." Ethan pressed his back against the wall, feeling his heart thundering. The whisper continued, stretching the syllables of his name like a living thing. Marcus shouted, "Stay away from him!" But the whisper only deepened. The shadows pooled at the doorway, swirling like smoke drawn toward Ethan. From the blackness, a shape began to form. Long, thin appendages stretching across the floor like searching hands. Each tendril left trails of frost as it moved. Marcus aimed his camera, and the night vision display revealed something horrifying. Beneath the tendrils, the shadows pulsed in patterns that matched the sigils on the floor and Ethan's ankle. The entity was not just reaching, it was communicating, claiming, closing the distance between their worlds. The clock blinked to life once more. The room froze in stillness. 2:33 a.m. The apartment shook violently, as if reality tore at the seams. Darkness surged from the bedroom, flooding the hallway. Ethan screamed, feeling the force pull at him again, stronger than ever. Marcus grabbed him, holding tight, but the pull dragged both men across the floor. Ethan felt the marks on his ankle burning white hot like a brand. A deep voice rose from the void, far different from the whispers. This one was ancient, vast, and resonant. It echoed from every direction. The mark is accepted. The hour claims him. The world distorted. The ceiling bent downward. The walls rippled like liquid. Ethan felt himself sliding toward the black mass in the hallway. Marcus yelled for him to fight, but the grip was overwhelming. Darkness wrapped around Ethan's legs, pulling him closer, inch by inch. His fingers scraped helplessly across the floor as he reached for anything to anchor himself. Then the apartment door exploded inward in a burst of blinding white light. A tall figure stepped through holding a staff carved with geometric symbols that glowed brilliantly against the darkness. The shadows recoiled instantly, screeching in a sound Ethan felt more than heard. The figure struck the staff against the ground, sending a wave of light through the apartment. The darkness shrieked, retreating violently back toward the bedroom. Ethan collapsed onto the floor, gasping. Marcus dragged him away from the hallway as the last tendrils dissolved into shadows. The light from the staff dimmed, revealing the stern face of Dr. Rowan Hawthorne. His eyes scanned the room quickly before settling on Ethan. "You should not have waited this long," he said in a calm, unwavering voice. "The hour has chosen you, and if we do not sever the connection soon, it will take you beyond the bed and into the fracture itself." Ethan stared at Dr. Rowan Hawthorne with a mixture of desperation and dread. The tall man's presence seemed to steady the air itself, as if reality bent slightly to accommodate him rather than the darkness. Marcus stood beside Ethan, breathing hard, sweat running down his face from both fear and adrenaline. The apartment remained unnaturally cold, the lights broken, shadows trembling softly as if still recoiling from Hawthorne's blast of white energy. Ethan tried to speak, but found his voice caught in his throat. It was Hawthorne who broke the silence. "Show me the room," he said quietly. Marcus hesitated. "It is dangerous in there." The entity nearly pulled Ethan through some kind of opening. "It is not like anything we have ever seen." Hawthorne gave him a calm but stern look. "That is exactly why I must see it." Ethan nodded shakily and rose to his feet, though his ankle still burned with lingering pain. Together they moved down the hallway. Each step felt heavier, as though approaching the bedroom pulled at something fundamental inside Ethan. When Hawthorne reached the doorway, he did not step inside immediately. Instead, he raised his staff and let its faint glow cast pale light across the room. The bed sat nearly flush with the ground, as if crushed downward. Its frame warped and twisted. Frost coated the edges of the bedposts. The air shimmered faintly, bending light around an invisible point beneath the center of the frame. The sigils scratched into the floor were no longer random marks. They formed a circular pattern, swirling inward toward the darkness beneath the bed like a gravitational pull captured in symbols. Hawthorne knelt slowly. When he touched the floor just outside the sigils, the carvings pulsed faintly with dull blue light. He frowned. This is older than I expected. This is not the writing of a spirit. This is the language of a boundary, and it is weakening. Ethan's stomach twisted. What does that mean? Hawthorne stood again and leveled his gaze at Ethan. It means the fracture between your world and its world is widening, and because you have been marked, you are now its anchor point. If the hour continues to strengthen, the entity will not need the bed. It will not need the apartment. It will come to you wherever the time strikes. The words crashed heavily into Ethan. He felt his knees weakening. Marcus moved closer, placing a steadying hand on his shoulder. "So what do we do?" he asked quietly. Hawthorne studied the bed for a long moment before answering. "We contain the fracture before it becomes irreversible. But first, I must understand the exact nature of this entity. It is not a ghost nor a demon. It is something from the interval between moments, a realm that touches yours only through cracks in time." Ethan swallowed, the whisper calling his name, the way it pulled him, the void beneath the bed. Everything made an awful sense now. Hawthorne stepped fully into the room, letting the sigils glow brighter beneath his feet, though they did not respond to him as violently as they did to Ethan. He knelt and slowly extended his staff beneath the edge of the bed. The tip shimmered, as though touching something unseen. Ethan felt the burn on his ankle flare sharply. Suddenly, the air in the room vibrated. A deep rumble spread through the walls. Hawthorne pulled the staff back instantly. A shadow surged upward from beneath the bed, slamming into the underside of the mattress so hard the whole frame lifted. Ethan staggered backward while Marcus pulled him away. Hawthorne remained still, raising one hand. A pale barrier of light materialized before him. Darkness struck it again and again, but could not pass through. The entity hissed from beneath the bed, its voice layered and warping through the room. "He is mine. The hour is mine. You cannot sever what has been chosen." Ethan trembled violently. Hearing its voice without the clock striking was worse than anything before. It meant the fracture was no longer bound strictly to the minute. Hawthorne struck the floor with his staff. The barrier of light brightened, blinding the darkness temporarily. The entity recoiled, slipping back beneath the bed with a rattling hiss. The sigils dimmed. Hawthorne stepped back and exhaled. "It is accelerating. This is worse than I feared." Marcus asked, "What do you need from us?" Hawthorne studied Ethan again. "I need to examine the mark." Ethan hesitated but extended his leg. The dark curved pattern seemed darker now, as if ink pooled beneath his skin. Hawthorne hovered his hand just above it. The mark pulsed faintly in response. "It is a temporal tether," Hawthorne said gravely. "It binds him to the fracture. When 2:33 a.m. arrives, that connection becomes active. The entity is using him as a doorway, drawing him into the interval. If it succeeds, Ethan will vanish into the hour, and he will not return." Ethan felt his throat tighten. "Then we need to remove the mark." Hawthorne shook his head. "Not remove. Break the connection. If I try to destroy it directly, the entity may sense the attempt and strike early. We must weaken the link gradually, then sever it at the exact moment the hour peaks. That is when the fracture will be most exposed." Marcus frowned. "That means Ethan has to face it again. Hawthorne nodded solemnly. Yes, but this time he will not be alone. Containment requires 3 roles. 1 to hold the boundary, 1 to manage the hour, and 1 to confront the entity directly. Ethan's heart sank. He already knew which role belonged to him. Before he could speak, the temperature plummeted so rapidly, frost spiderwebbed across the walls. All 3 men turned sharply toward the bed. Darkness poured out like smoke twisting upward. The clock on the nightstand flickered as though something pressed against it from inside, but the time read only 10:14 p.m. Ethan whispered, "It is early again." The darkness surged violently, striking the walls. Hawthorne slammed his staff down, creating another burst of light that forced the shadows back. Marcus grabbed Ethan's arm, pulling him away. Hawthorne shouted, "The fracture is widening beyond the hour. We must begin containment immediately." The darkness retreated sluggishly, as if resisting the pull of the light. Ethan stared in horror. If it was no longer bound to 2:33 a.m., then the entity was breaking free. The mark on his ankle pulsed with a sickening rhythm. He felt its attention like a weight on his soul. Hawthorne strode out of the room with urgency. "We have until the next hour strikes. At 2:33 a.m., the fracture will fully open. If we fail to act before then, it will not need the bed or the apartment. It will take him through any shadow, any floor, any breath." Ethan felt the world tilt as a cold realization struck him. The hour was no longer chasing him, it was hunting him. The apartment vibrated with a low hum that seemed to come from deep within the walls, as though the building itself felt the pressure of the widening fracture. Ethan sat on the floor of the living room, unable to steady his breath. Every shadow looked sharper than it should, each corner deeper, as though the darkness had been stretched by invisible hands. Dr. Rowan Hawthorne moved around the room with urgent precision, drawing geometric patterns on the floor using a chalk-like substance that glowed faintly when touched by the air. Marcus carried equipment back and forth from his cases, his movements quick and trembling. No one spoke unless absolutely necessary. There was no room for wasted time. Hawthorne finished a large circular formation on the floor, its symbols intertwining in a pattern Ethan did not recognize. The runes curved inward toward a center point, where Hawthorne placed the staff upright. It stood on its own, humming softly like a resonant tuning fork. Ethan felt the vibration deep inside his bones. He could not tell if the sensation came from the staff or the mark on his ankle. Marcus stood beside Ethan. "You holding up?" he asked quietly. Ethan shook his head. "I do not know if I can do this." Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder. "You are not doing it alone." But the words offered little comfort. Ethan could still hear the entity whispering his name, echoing in his mind like a memory he could not escape. Hawthorne approached them, his expression solemn. "We begin the containment once the hour crosses into its final phase," he said. "The boundary will weaken drastically, and the entity will try to breach with full force. That is when it will attempt to take you. That is when we strike." Ethan swallowed hard. "What exactly do I have to do?" Hawthorne glanced at the glowing circle. Stand inside the formation when the ritual begins. The entity will focus on you. It must. You are the marked anchor. While it tries to pull you, the circle will restrict its reach. Marcus and I will reinforce the boundary. When the entity is fully extended into this world, that is when its tether is vulnerable, Marcus added. And that is when Hawthorne cuts the link. Ethan looked at both men, fear twisting his gut. And if it does not work, Hawthorne answered honestly, then the entity will take you, and if it succeeds, it will widen the fracture permanently. Others will follow through the hour. This world is not prepared for that. Ethan's heart pounded as if trying to break free from his chest. He nodded slowly. I will do it. Hawthorne placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. You have more strength than you think. The fact you resisted it twice is remarkable. Most could not endure a single pull into the hour. Ethan was not sure whether the words were meant as praise or warning. The air grew colder with each passing minute. Marcus checked the clock on the table. Even though the time no longer behaved predictably, the hands twitched slightly, like something pressed from beneath the glass. At 1:58 a.m., the lights flickered violently. Ethan felt the mark on his ankle pulse. A sudden wave of nausea washed over him. Hawthorne immediately guided him toward the center of the circle. It has begun, Hawthorne said. Early again, Marcus moved to the edge of the formation, holding a portable light emitter that glowed with a dull blue hue. Hawthorne took his place opposite him, raising both hands over the runes. The staff in the center brightened, casting pale beams across the room. The apartment creaked deeply, like something enormous shifted beneath it. Ethan's breath trembled. The shadows along the walls grew longer, stretching toward him as though drawn by invisible strings. The temperature plummeted so sharply, frost formed on Ethan's eyelashes. A distant scraping echoed from the bedroom. Then another, louder, closer. Hawthorne spoke firmly. Ethan, do not step out of the circle no matter what happens. The entity will test the boundary. Do not let it break your will. Ethan nodded, though his legs nearly gave out beneath him. Marcus tightened his grip on the emitter, pointing it toward the hallway. The scraping transformed into a violent dragging sound. Something massive was moving beneath the floor. The ground trembled. Ethan stumbled but stayed inside the circle. The mark on his ankle burned hotter, pulsing in rhythm with the vibration of the building. Darkness spilled into the hallway like smoke pouring from a collapsed void. The tendrils crawled along the floor, leaving frost wherever they touched. Ethan gasped as they reached the living room doorway. The shadows hesitated at the edge of the formation as though sensing the barrier. Then the whisper came, "Ethan, come, it is time." The voice came from everywhere at once, vibrating through the walls, the floor, the air itself. The staff's glow flickered. Marcus shouted, "It is pushing in." Hawthorne raised his voice, "Hold the boundary." The tendrils struck the barrier with a hiss. The runes on the floor flared bright blue. The entity recoiled, but pressed again harder, testing the circle from every angle. The room shook violently. Furniture rattled. Frost spread across the ceiling. Ethan clutched his head as the whisper grew louder, burrowing into his thoughts. The entity was not just speaking to him, it was inside him. "You are mine. The hour is mine." Step forward. Ethan gritted his teeth. He forced his feet to remain still, though every instinct screamed to run. His vision blurred as darkness swirled beneath the bed in his mind, dragging him back into memory. He smelled the same cold earth, the same rotting scent. Hawthorne shouted Ethan, "Focus. It cannot cross unless you allow it." Ethan steadied his breath. He clenched his hands into fists. "I am not yours." The shadows lunged violently. The barrier shook. The circle dimmed for a moment, and the entity roared. A sound so deep Ethan felt it vibrate inside his chest. Marcus activated the emitter, blasting a beam of blue light into the mass. The shadows recoiled, shrieking. Hawthorne struck the floor with his staff, sending waves of white light outward. The barrier brightened again, but the entity pushed harder. Tendrils rose from the floor, twisting like skeletal branches. They pressed downward from the ceiling. They struck the barrier from every angle. Ethan felt the force pulling at him, tugging at the mark on his ankle like a hook embedded in his flesh. Hawthorne yelled, "It is extending fully. This is the moment." The shadows surged upward in a massive wave, forming a towering shape at the edge of the circle. Ethan saw shapes inside the darkness, distorted forms writhing like trapped souls. A torn face, a stretched jaw, hollow eyes, all layered within the swirling void. The entity roared, "Step into the hour." Ethan screamed in defiance. "No!" Hawthorne slammed the staff into the ground. A crack of white energy split the air. The tendril connected to Ethan's ankle blazed with light. The mark flared bright red, then blue, then white. Ethan felt the burn sear through him like a blade. The entity shrieked loud enough to shake the entire building. Hawthorne shouted, "Now!" Marcus and Hawthorne pressed their hands to the runes. The circle erupted in blinding radiance. Ethan felt a violent snap like a cord breaking deep inside his chest. The shadows recoiled violently, collapsing back into the hallway. The towering form shattered like smoke blown apart by a storm. The entity's roar faded into a distant echo as the darkness was forced backward. Pulled into itself again, the room returned to silence. The circle dimmed. Ethan fell to his knees, gasping. The mark on his ankle had faded dramatically, now only a faint outline. Marcus knelt beside him. "Ethan, are you okay?" He nodded shakily. "I think so." Hawthorne approached, pale and winded. "The connection is weakened, but not destroyed. The final severing must be done during the hour itself." Ethan stared at the fading mark. 2:33 a.m. was coming, and the entity would not retreat a second time. For the first time since the encounters began, the apartment fell into something that resembled calm, not peace. Peace had long abandoned Ethan, but a fragile stillness, like the thin crust of ice covering a lake before it fractures under the slightest weight. Ethan sat on the living room floor, wrapped in a blanket, sweat still clinging to his skin despite the freezing air. His chest rose and fell in unsteady breaths. The glowing runes of the containment circle had faded almost completely by now, leaving faint chalk traces that looked insignificant compared to the terror they had just held back. Marcus checked Ethan for injuries, while Dr. Rowan Hawthorne examined the runes carefully, adjusting symbols and redrawing a few lines where the chalk had cracked. The tall man's movements were precise, almost ritualistic. Ethan watched him with wide eyes, trying not to think about the way the entity had towered above the circle, its distorted faces writhing within the shadows. Even now, Ethan could hear faint echoes of its roar in the back of his mind, like an aftershock that refused to fade. "How weakened is the connection?" Ethan asked, voice trembling. Hawthorne paused mid-stroke. "We bought time, nothing more. The tether is frayed, but not broken. When the hour reaches its peak, the entity will return with every intention of reclaiming what it believes is marked." Ethan rubbed the faded mark on his ankle. It still pulsed faintly like a heartbeat, not entirely his own. Marcus handed Ethan a glass of water. "The entity certainly acts like it owns you." Ethan forced a weak smile. "That is not reassuring." Marcus sighed. "Sorry, I do not really know how to joke about cosmic nightmares." Hawthorne finished redrawing the last sigil and rose to his full height. His expression was stern yet thoughtful, as though analyzing calculations Ethan could not begin to comprehend. "The entity is learning," he murmured. "It is adapting, and that is what concerns me most." Ethan's stomach tightened. "What do you mean, adapting?" Hawthorne turned toward Ethan and Marcus. "When we severed part of its tether, the entity experienced resistance unlike any prior interaction with this world. Most would withdraw, most would retreat, but instead, it tested the barrier from every angle. It searched for weaknesses. It even forced partial manifestation well before the appointed hour. That level of strategic behavior is extremely rare." Marcus frowned. "So it is intelligent." "Far beyond intelligent," Hawthorne answered. "It is purposeful." Ethan hugged himself tightly. "What happens if it becomes strong enough to break through before 2:33 a.m.? Hawthorne did not sugarcoat it. "Then containment will fail, and the hour will no longer be an hour. It will become a state, a condition, a place that overlaps your reality permanently." Ethan felt nausea churn deep in his gut. He closed his eyes and tried to steady his breathing. The room felt too small, too cold, too alive with unseen danger. Marcus knelt in front of Ethan. "Hey, listen. We are going to stop this. You hear me? We will make it through the night." Ethan nodded, though the fear remained. The minutes crept by slowly. The apartment's lights flickered occasionally, responding to shifts in the air pressure as if the building sensed the entity preparing itself. Even the shadows along the walls felt wrong, bending too sharply where they met the floor. Hawthorne prepared tools from his satchel, small metallic rods etched with symbols, vials of dark powdered minerals, and narrow strips of paper covered in identical runes to those drawn on the floor. Ethan did not understand any of it, but he trusted Hawthorne more than he trusted his own senses at this point. "Explain to me again what happens at 2:33. Ethan asked quietly. Hawthorne crouched near the staff and spoke with careful precision. "The hour is a doorway. Most nights it is merely a sliver. But tonight, because of repeated contact, the fracture will widen. The entity will not need to drag you beneath the bed. It will manifest directly through the time tether. You were marked as its anchor. Through you, it will attempt to stabilize itself in this world." Marcus looked uneasy. "And if it stabilizes?" Hawthorne's jaw tightened. Then more will come. Through the same fracture, silence fell over the room. Ethan tried not to imagine a world where the entity was not the only one lurking in darkness, waiting for a single moment in time to open. At 200 a.m., the apartment temperature dropped again. The air turned sharp and brittle. Ethan's breath plumed visibly in front of him. Marcus grabbed a blanket and wrapped it around Ethan. Though the cold still seeped through, Hawthorne instructed Ethan to stand again inside the containment circle. Not yet fully activated, it still hummed faintly. Ethan's legs trembled as he stepped inside. His skin prickled. It felt like crossing into a different atmosphere, a space just slightly out of sync with the rest of the room. Marcus took position at the right side of the circle, holding another blue light emitter. Hawthorne stood to the left, raising the staff. Both men cast brief glances at Ethan. "Stay centered," Hawthorne said. "When the entity pulls, do not step out. Even an inch outside the boundary will break the circle." Ethan nodded, heart pounding. At 2:12 a.m., a faint vibration ran through the apartment. Not violent, not sharp. Instead, it pulsed like slow breathing from beneath the floorboards. Ethan's ankle burned. The mark glowed faintly red. Then the first whisper came. "Ethan," soft, gentle, almost kind. Ethan flinched. His knees weakened. Marcus tightened his stance. "Ready?" Hawthorne gripped the staff firmly. "Ignore it." The whisper came again, louder, layered with echoing tones that did not belong to any human voice. "Ethan, come home." His heart lurched. He felt an overwhelming sensation of familiarity, as though the voice came from some distant memory buried deep within him. It frightened him more than the roar earlier. Suddenly, the shadows along the walls rose like smoke pulled upward by unseen strings. The runes beneath Ethan's feet brightened. Marcus shouted, "The hour is starting early again." Hawthorne raised the staff. "Hold the boundary." The apartment's windows rattled violently. Frost spread outward from the bedroom doorway. Ethan's ears rang as the air pressure shifted suddenly. Then the clock on the table flickered. 2:33 a.m. Too early, far too early. Hawthorne cursed under his breath. "It is forcing the moment into alignment." Darkness surged through the hallway in a massive wave. Tendrils coiled and twisted, forming towering shapes that scraped the ceiling. Multiple layers of voices echoed through the apartment. "You are mine." Ethan staggered but stayed inside the circle. The pull began instantly. His entire body lurched forward as though hooked by an invisible force. His breath caught in his throat. The ankle mark glowed white hot. Marcus activated the emitter. Blue light blasted across the shadows, creating ripples in the darkness. The entity recoiled, but struck again with even greater force. Hawthorne slammed the staff into the ground. The containment circle erupted in bright white light. Ethan screamed. The pull intensified so sharply he nearly collapsed. The circle shook. Cracks formed in the chalk. The entity roared. Hawthorne yelled, "Ethan, hold!" Ethan planted his feet. Every muscle burned. Every part of him screamed in terror. But he stood his ground. The shadows surged forward in one final strike. The circle flared blindingly, and then everything stopped. Silence, stillness. The pull vanished completely. Ethan gasped, collapsing to his knees. The shadows froze midair before slowly retreating back toward the hallway like a tide drawn away by a receding storm. The light faded. Marcus rushed into the circle, grabbing Ethan before he fell forward. Hawthorne breathed heavily, lowering the staff. His face was pale. The entity is preparing something. That was not an attack. Ethan trembled violently. Then what was it? Hawthorne looked toward the dark hallway. A warning. The quiet that followed the entity's retreat felt unnatural, too still, like the air was holding its breath. Ethan sat trembling inside the dimmed containment circle, his body still shaking from the force that had nearly torn him out of it. Marcus knelt at his side, gripping his shoulders to keep him steady, while Hawthorne paced in a slow arc around the circle, studying each rune with a hawk-like intensity. The room buzzed faintly with leftover energy, the runes flickering like dying embers. Ethan could feel it in his bones. Something was wrong. Something had changed. That was not an attack, Ethan whispered, repeating Hawthorne's words. But if it was a warning, then what is it preparing for? Hawthorne stopped pacing. His face was shadowed, eyes distant with calculation. It is attempting to synchronize the hour beyond its natural limit. It is trying to make 2:33 a.m. permanent, not a moment, but a state of being. Marcus froze. You mean like a time loop? Worse, Hawthorne answered. A temporal overlay, a fracture that forces the world into the hour's conditions. The entity would not simply visit at 2:33 a.m. It would exist here always, and others would follow through that same breach. This entire place would become part of its realm. Ethan's heart dropped. The cold in the apartment deepened. A faint wind blew through the hallway, though no window was open. How much time do we have? Ethan asked. Hawthorne looked toward the clock, which flickered again, though the hands did not move. Hours no longer matter to it. It is syncing the hour to you instead. The clock will shift when it wants to, not when the world does. Ethan's throat tightened, so it could strike at any moment. Yes, Hawthorne knelt beside the circle, which is why we must act before it forces permanence. Marcus swallowed hard. What do we do next? Hawthorne removed a small metal case from his satchel and opened it carefully. Inside lay 6 thin rods engraved with intricate runes. He placed them one by one around the circle's perimeter. These will reinforce the containment, but only for the final severing. We cannot use them prematurely, or the entity will sense our intent. For now, Ethan must recover. The ritual cannot succeed if he enters the hour weakened. Ethan nodded shakily, though he doubted he would ever feel whole again. His muscles ached. His mind buzzed with remnants of the entity's voice. Every echo of his name still pulsed in his skull. Marcus helped Ethan out of the circle and guided him to the couch. The moment Ethan left the chalk boundary, he felt the weight of the room shift, as though invisible eyes turned to follow him. He shivered and wrapped the blanket tightly around himself. Hawthorne dimmed the remaining lights and checked the hallway, ensuring no shadows moved unnaturally. Marcus placed the blue emitter within reach just in case the entity pushed through again. Ethan could feel the mark on his ankle throbbing softly, like a reminder that the entity had not retreated. It had merely paused. Minutes passed. maybe hours. Time felt slippery, unreliable. Ethan leaned against the couch and closed his eyes. The exhaustion in his body felt bottomless, as if sleep could swallow him whole. But rest was impossible. Each time he drifted close, he heard whispers in the darkness, voices curling through his thoughts like curling smoke. Ethan, he jolted awake, breath hitching. Marcus grabbed his arm. Ethan, hey, you are okay. Nothing crossed the barrier. Ethan rubbed his eyes. It felt so real. Hawthorne returned from the hallway. The entity is probing your mind. It is preparing you for the hour. It wants you disoriented, exhausted, easy to pull. We cannot allow it. I do not think I can stay awake much longer, Ethan murmured. Hawthorne knelt in front of him. Listen to me carefully. The hour does not draw power from your wakefulness. It draws power from your fear. Staying awake is not the key. Resisting is. Ethan swallowed. How do I resist something inside my head? By understanding that the voice is not your memory. It is merely imitating familiarity. Nothing it tells you belongs to you. Ethan nodded weakly, though the explanation did little to ease his dread. Suddenly, the apartment lights flickered again. A tremor rolled through the floorboards. Marcus jumped to his feet, grabbing the emitter. Hawthorne snapped the staff into position, but the shadows did not surge. Instead, the apartment fell into a deeper stillness, not silent, but muted, like the world had been wrapped in heavy cloth. Ethan stood slowly. What is happening? Hawthorne's grip on the staff tightened. The entity is adjusting the hour. It is not arriving. It is reshaping. Marcus looked out the window. The city outside seemed distant, blurred, as though viewed through a layer of darkened glass. Guys, I think it is affecting more than the apartment. Hawthorne moved toward the window and studied the distorted skyline. Time dilation is spreading. The fracture is leaking beyond its point of origin. Ethan stepped back. You mean the city could fall into the hour too? If we fail tonight, Hawthorne replied. This city, this world, all of it may bend. A ringing sound filled the room, soft at first, then growing louder. Ethan glanced toward the clock. It was moving, but not forward. Backward, the hands spun in reverse, faster and faster until they blurred. Ethan felt a pulse in the air, like a heartbeat synchronized to the spinning clock. And then the clock slammed to a halt. 2:33 a.m. No one moved. No one breathed. Ethan felt the pull like a hook burying itself into his chest. He stumbled forward. Gasping, Marcus grabbed him instantly, but the force was immense. Hawthorne shouted into the circle now. Marcus dragged Ethan toward the chalk boundary as the shadows erupted from the hallway. Tendrils shot across the ceiling and walls, twisting into the living room with violent force. Frost exploded outward from the floor. Ethan reached the circle just as a tendril snapped around his ankle, pulling tight like a snare. He screamed as it yanked him backward. Marcus tackled him, holding him down as the circle's runes ignited with blinding white light. The entity roared. The walls shook. Hawthorne slammed the staff into the center of the circle. A shockwave spread outward, forming a dome of crackling energy that forced the shadows back. Ethan felt the pull intensify, ripping at his body with impossible strength. He pressed his hands against the floor, fighting with every ounce of will he had left. The entity whispered through the storm of shadows, its voice echoing like 1,000 layered tones. "Ethan, come home." The whisper was gentle, comforting, familiar. It wrapped around him like a memory he had forgotten he loved. And that was what scared him the most. The circle blazed brighter. Hawthorne yelled, "Hold the boundary." Marcus pulled harder. Ethan screamed against the pull. The whisper deepened. "You are not fighting me. You are returning." Ethan's mind fractured for a moment, slipping between fear and something dangerously close to longing. But then, a burst of white light erupted from the staff. The tendril shattered. Ethan collapsed inside the circle, sobbing in relief. The shadows recoiled once more, but they did not vanish. Instead, they hovered near the walls, waiting. Hawthorne's voice was grim. It is no longer attacking suddenly. It is no longer probing. It is preparing for the final hour. The apartment no longer felt like a place humans were meant to inhabit. After the last surge, the shadows that lingered did not behave like ordinary darkness. They clung to the walls like living stains, pulsing faintly as if breathing. The temperature refused to rise. Every exhale turned to mist, and though the room was still, Ethan felt the pressure of something enormous pressing just beyond the thin shell of reality. Marcus paced in tight circles, rubbing his forehead with trembling hands. Hawthorne remained near the containment circle, adjusting the metallic rods one by one, each movement slower and heavier than before. Ethan sat on the couch, gripping the blanket so tightly his knuckles whitened. No one spoke for several minutes. The silence was too thick, like the air itself resisted forming sound. Finally, Ethan whispered, "It is waiting." Hawthorne nodded, though his expression was grim. "Yes, it is conserving strength. What you experienced just now was not the hour. It was the prelude." Marcus shuddered. If that was the prelude, what is the actual hour going to look like? Hawthorne did not answer immediately. Instead, he touched the runes carved into the metallic rods, and they glowed faintly in response. The final hour will not simply pull Ethan. It will reshape this place into a bridge. The entity will anchor itself directly into our world through him. If we fail, containment will not be possible again. Ethan swallowed. "What happens to me if we succeed?" Hawthorne looked at him with steady but somber eyes. "You will survive, but the mark may leave scars that are not physical." Ethan nodded weakly. He had felt those scars forming already. Marcus knelt in front of him. "Look, man, I am not letting some interdimensional nightmare take you. Not happening." Ethan tried to smile. "I appreciate that." Before Marcus could reply, the lights flickered again, slow, steady pulses, not random, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. The shadows along the walls vibrated in perfect sync. Ethan's pulse quickened. "It is practicing, preparing." Hawthorne turned sharply. "No, it is remembering." The shadows deepened. Every corner stretched longer, darker. Ethan stared, wide-eyed, as the living stains along the walls began to change shape, subtly, forming twisted outlines, doors, hallways, something like windows. Marcus stepped back, What is it doing? Hawthorne's voice dropped. It is imprinting fragments of its realm onto ours. The walls are remembering the hour. When the final moment comes, those imprints will become passageways. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. So the apartment will become a gateway. Yes, and not just the apartment. The fracture is no longer localized. A sudden groaning sound rolled through the ceiling, deep and resonant. Ethan flinched. Marcus grabbed the emitter. Is it in the ceiling now? Marcus asked. Not yet, Hawthorne replied, but soon everything will bend toward the hour. Reality thins where the entity exerts pressure. Ethan rubbed his arms, trying to warm himself, but the cold only dug deeper. His ankle burned faintly again. The mark pulsed with slow, rhythmic throbs. Marcus noticed. Ethan, is it hurting? Ethan nodded. It feels like it is waking up. The lights dimmed further until only the faint glow of the runes illuminated the room. Hawthorne moved quickly to Ethan's side. Describe the sensation. Ethan clutched his ankle, breathing hard. It is like something is pushing from the inside, like it is trying to open. Opening, Hawthorne murmured. The tether inside him is preparing for resonance. Marcus looked horrified. Meaning what exactly? Meaning when the hour hits, it will not just pull from outside, it will pull from within. Ethan's chest tightened. I cannot let it take me. I cannot. Hawthorne placed a firm hand on his shoulder. You will not be taken if you hold the circle, but you must not break focus. Not for an instant. Ethan nodded, though fear twisted inside him like a blade. A sudden, sharp crack rang out from the bedroom. All three men turned. The sound echoed like splintering wood, followed by a deep rumble. Frost raced across the floor from the hallway, creeping into the living room faster than before. Hawthorne raised the staff. It is beginning to breach early again, but before he could finish, the clock on the table flickered violently. The hands spun forward, then backward, then forward again. Erratically, Ethan stared at the spinning hands. It is forcing the moment. Marcus took a step back. How is it even doing that? Time is merely the doorway, Hawthorne said, and the entity is learning how to shape the frame around it. Then the clock snapped to a halt. 2:33 a.m. Every light in the apartment died. A pulse of darkness rolled through the hallway like a shock wave. Ethan stumbled backward. Marcus grabbed him. Hawthorne slammed the staff into the ground and shouted, "Into the circle. Now!" They rushed him inside. The runes ignited instantly in bright white light. The metallic rods trembled, humming with power. Then the shadows came. They did not crawl this time. They did not slither. They fell. A waterfall of darkness poured from the ceiling, cascading down the walls like liquid night. Tendrils stretched across the floor in every direction. Distorted faces swirled in the mass, their mouths stretching open in silent screams. Marcus shouted, "What is that?" Hawthorne's voice thundered. "It is its realm. It is showing its true form." The shadows surged toward the circle, but recoiled when they touched the barrier. The entire room shook violently. Then a voice emerged. Not a whisper, not layered, not distant. A full, resonant voice that filled the entire apartment. Ethan. Ethan clutched his chest. The pull hit instantly. A force slammed into him from within, dragging him toward the edge of the circle. He threw his weight backward, but the pull only grew stronger. Marcus grabbed him, holding tight. Ethan screamed, "It hurts, Marcus, it hurts." Hawthorne raised the staff overhead. Runes along the rods flared brighter. "Hold him. Do not let him cross the line." Ethan felt his body being tugged forward inch by inch. His fingernails scraped the floor. The circle trembled. Cracks formed in the chalk boundary. The entity's voice deepened. "You are the doorway." Ethan sobbed, I am not. But the pull intensified, ripping through him like fire. Marcus gritted his teeth. "No, I am not letting you go." The shadows swirled violently. A massive tendril slammed against the barrier, sending shockwaves through the room. The ceiling cracked. The floor buckled. The circle flickered. Hawthorne shouted, "Ethan, fight! Fight it!" Ethan felt something snap inside him. Fear turning into fury. He planted his hands on the ground and screamed at the top of his lungs, "I am not yours." A burst of light erupted from the runes. The pull snapped. The shadows recoiled violently, collapsing inward like a tide rushing backward. The apartment shook one final time before falling eerily still. Then silence. Slowly, the shadows slithered toward the hallway, disappearing one by one. The clock blinked once more. 2:12 a.m. Time had reset again. Ethan collapsed, sobbing with exhaustion. Marcus held him tightly. Hawthorne rested the staff against the floor and whispered the words Ethan feared most. "It will return, and the next time will be the final hour." Ethan sat trembling in Marcus's arms, trying to force air back into his lungs. The shadows that had swarmed the apartment now slithered back into the hallway, as though retreating into a deeper chamber of darkness. The room remained cold, but not the same cold as before. This was heavier, like standing inside the breath of something vast and ancient. Hawthorne stood near the containment circle, gripping his staff tightly. He did not celebrate the small victory. He did not relax. His eyes remained fixed on the hallway, where the darkness had vanished. Marcus looked at him with desperation. "Tell me that meant something. Tell me he broke a piece of it." Hawthorne shook his head slowly. "Not broken, only resisted." The entity was not attempting to take him just now. It was testing the limits of his will. It now knows how far Ethan can hold before breaking. Ethan wiped cold sweat from his face. "So it is learning me." "It already has," Hawthorne said grimly. "Now it is measuring you." Marcus stared in disbelief. Measuring him for what? For the final hour, for the shape it must take to breach fully. Ethan felt a shiver wrap around his spine like a coiling hand. The pain in his ankle returned, but this time it pulsed deeper, not on the skin, but beneath it. He flinched and grabbed it tightly. Marcus noticed. "Ethan, what's happening?" "It burns. It is like something is moving under the mark." Hawthorne approached quickly, kneeling in front of him. "Describe the sensation." Ethan gritted his teeth. "It is crawling, like something alive is inside the mark." Hawthorne touched the faint outline on Ethan's ankle without making contact. His expression tightened. The tether is maturing. The entity is embedding more of its presence into you. When the final hour arrives, it will not need to pull as hard. It will already have a foothold inside your body. Ethan's stomach twisted. You are saying it can take me without dragging me through. Yes, if we do not sever the tether, it will simply claim you from within. Those words sat in the air like a heavy stone. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. Then we have to destroy the tether now. We cannot, Hawthorne replied. Not until the hour is at its full strength. If we attempt to break it early, the entity will sense the attempt and force the hour upon us immediately, overriding the barrier. Everything we have built will collapse in an instant. Ethan's breath trembled. So I have to endure this until then. Hawthorne nodded. And when the moment comes, you must do more than endure. You must face it. Ethan closed his eyes as dread washed over him. The shadows along the walls twitched subtly, reacting to his fear. Hawthorne noticed. You must not let it feed on your panic. The tether responds to emotion. The more fear you feel, the stronger the bond becomes. Ethan forced himself to breathe slowly. Though his lungs felt constricted, he focused on Marcus's voice. Hey, look at me. You are not alone. You hear me. You are not alone. I am right here. Ethan nodded weakly, but the moment he tried to steady himself, something shifted in the apartment. A deep rumble rolled through the building, low and resonant, as if something enormous exhaled from beneath the floor. The lights flickered. The runes on the containment circle glowed faintly. Then the walls began to move, not in the physical sense, not bending or collapsing. Instead, the shadows began rearranging themselves. Lines formed, shapes bent, angles twisted. The shadows on the walls were no longer random darkness. They were maps. Ethan stared in horror. What is that? Hawthorne stepped closer to the wall, studying the shifting darkness. It is mapping its realm onto yours. This is an early sign of full breach. Marcus swallowed. You mean the hour is trying to merge? Yes, and once the merger begins, our world starts to reflect its geometry. What you see now are the first lines of the fracture. Ethan stared harder. The shadows formed a corridor, a long, narrow hallway that did not exist in their apartment. It seemed to stretch endlessly in one direction. I have seen that corridor before, Ethan whispered. In my dreams. Marcus turned sharply. What dreams? Before any of this started, I had nightmares, hallways bending into darkness, a whisper calling me, and I always woke up at exactly 2:33. Hawthorne straightened. Then the entity has been reaching for you much longer than we thought. Perhaps years. Ethan froze. Years. The mark is new, but the attention is not. You have been chosen slowly, over time, and the hour has been shaping itself around you long before the first manifestation. Ethan felt sick. His hands trembled uncontrollably. The hallway of shadows deepened, pulling his attention like a magnet. Something moved inside it, a faint shape, a subtle ripple. Marcus raised the emitter. Hawthorne snapped his staff upward. Do not let it tempt you, Hawthorne warned. It will try to lure you before the hour. If you step into its projection, the tether will strengthen instantly. But Ethan could not look away. The figure in the corridor moved closer, slowly, carefully, as though studying him too. Then the voice came again. Ethan. This time it was not commanding, not roaring, not layered. It was Ethan's own voice. Marcus froze. Hawthorne stiffened. Ethan whispered, horrified, "That is me." His own voice echoed from the shadow corridor, identical in tone, breath, cadence. "Ethan, come see." Marcus grabbed Ethan's shoulders. "Do not listen. It is mimicking you," Hawthorne added sharply. "If you answer, it will deepen the resonance." Ethan shut his eyes tightly, but the whisper only grew clearer. "I am already there. You just have not joined me yet." A violent tremor ripped through the apartment. The clock hands spun again, this time slowly, deliberately, like a predator savoring its movements. Ethan stared at it helplessly. "No, not again. Not yet," Hawthorne shouted. "Brace yourselves." The clock snapped to a halt. 2:33 a.m. But this time, it did not flicker back. It held steady. The hour had arrived, and it refused to end. The shadows exploded from the hallway, filling the apartment with violent force. The floor buckled, the walls cracked, the rooms ignited in blinding white light. Marcus shoved Ethan into the containment circle. Ethan screamed as the tether inside him tightened like barbed wire being pulled taut. The entity roared not from beyond the bed, not from the hallway, but from everywhere at once. "You are the hour." Ethan fell to his knees, clutching his chest as the force inside him surged. Hawthorne yelled, "Ethan, fight! Do not let it complete the tether." But Ethan felt something inside his mind tearing open. His heartbeat synced with the frozen time. His breath faltered. The force pulling him now was not external. It was coming from within. He gasped, I cannot stop it." Marcus grabbed his arms. "Ethan, stay with me. Look at me. You are here. You are here." The circle blazed brighter. The shadows circled the dome. The entity roared louder. Then, a sudden crack of energy erupted from Hawthorne's staff. The pull inside Ethan's chest snapped violently. He collapsed forward, barely conscious. The shadows halted, then slowly withdrew. The hour remained frozen at 2:33, glowing faintly like an eye staring directly at him. Hawthorne exhaled, pale and shaken. "It knows." Ethan lifted his head weakly. "Knows what?" Hawthorne answered with dread in his voice. "That the final severing will destroy one of you. Either Ethan or the entity." The apartment had not changed, yet nothing about it felt familiar anymore. Ethan sat in the dim glow of the containment circle, breathing in shallow, broken gasps. His body trembled, as if every muscle had forgotten what rest meant. The hour remained locked at 2:33 a.m. on the flickering clock. A frozen eye staring at him, waiting, watching. Marcus paced near the kitchen, checking the emitter over and over again with restless hands. Hawthorne stood near the doorway, eyes fixed on the hallway, unmoving except for his slow, deliberate breathing. The shadows had retreated for now, but the silence they left behind vibrated with tension. It felt like the breath before a scream. Ethan rubbed the mark on his ankle. feeling its faint pulse beneath the skin. The last surge had left it burning hot, but now it felt cold, too cold, like a shard of ice embedded deep inside him. His chest tightened. "It is growing quieter," he whispered. Marcus turned, concern written across his face. "What do you mean, quieter?" Ethan tapped his chest lightly. "The tether, the pull, it is still there, but it feels like it is waiting, not pressing, not pushing, waiting." Hawthorne's head turned slightly. His voice was low, controlled. "That means the entity is consolidating its strength. It is anchoring its realm beneath the surface, preparing to breach fully. Silence is not peace. Silence is strategy." Ethan shivered. He could still remember the whisper of his own voice coming from the shadow corridor. The entity's mimicry was too perfect, too intimate. It felt like the thing inside the darkness had peeled open part of Ethan's mind and studied it piece by piece. He looked around the apartment. The walls were still, but the shadows clung to them like stains. Occasionally one would twitch, as if remembering how to move. "Why me?" Ethan whispered. "Why was it me?" Hawthorne finally turned to face him, his expression somber. "Because you are perceptive, vulnerable at the edges of sleep. Individuals like you sense the fracture before it fully forms. That awareness makes you visible to the inhabitants of the hour." Marcus frowned. "So it just picks people, not randomly," Hawthorne replied. "It seeks those who linger between waking and sleeping, those who notice the wrongness of a moment they should have ignored. Once chosen, the hour begins to shape itself around them." Ethan lowered his head. "I should never have looked under the bed. That first night, I should have ignored the sound." "No," Hawthorne corrected. "The sound was not meant for your ears. The entity had already chosen you. The moment you woke at 2:33 a.m. was the moment it marked you internally. The bed, the room, the corridor, those were surfaces. The real tether formed the moment you opened your eyes." Ethan felt sick. Marcus stepped closer. "Then how do we sever something that is inside him?" Hawthorne placed the staff gently on the floor. "The final severing requires three things: the full force of the entity, the full strength of the tether, and Ethan's absolute refusal to cross the threshold it presents. Only then can the break occur." Ethan's voice cracked. "And if I slip, even for a moment?" Hawthorne's eyes darkened. "If you slip, the tether completes, and the entity wins." Ethan leaned back against the couch cushions, feeling the air thicken around him. Every breath tasted colder. Every shadow seemed to lean slightly closer. Before he could gather his thoughts, a sound echoed down the hallway. A soft tap. Ethan froze. Marcus raised the emitter. Hawthorne lifted the staff. The tap came again, slow, rhythmic, like a single finger knocking gently on a wooden surface. Marcus whispered, "Is it in the hallway again?" Hawthorne shook his head. "No, that sound is beneath us." Ethan's skin crawled. Beneath the apartment, Marcus swallowed hard. Beneath the floor. "You are kidding me." The tapping intensified, becoming a steady beat. Each impact vibrated through the floorboards, resonating inside Ethan's bones. Hawthorne moved toward the center of the room. "Everyone stand back." Marcus helped Ethan to his feet, though the trembling in Ethan's legs hardly allowed him to stand. Together they stepped away from the circle as Hawthorne raised the staff. The tapping stopped. Then the floor bulged upward. Ethan gasped. The wooden boards warped, bending like something massive pressed against them from below. Frost cracked across the surface. The lights flickered. Marcus shouted, "It is trying to manifest inside the floor." Hawthorne slammed the staff down. A shockwave rippled across the room, halting the bulge for a moment. But only for a moment. The entity pushed again. The floor cracked open slightly. Cold air blasted upward. A tendril of darkness coiled through the gap, moving slowly, deliberately, as if savoring its arrival. Hawthorne's voice boomed with authority. "Ethan, into the circle. Now!" Marcus hauled Ethan back into the containment circle. The runes flared. The rods ignited. Ethan's ankle burned with sudden intensity. The tendril swayed, then snapped toward the circle like a striking serpent. The barrier held, but only barely. Ethan screamed as the tether inside him surged, pulling him forward. Marcus grabbed him from behind, anchoring him in place. The entity pushed further into the room. More tendrils rose through the cracked floor. A churning mass of shadow followed, swirling and twisting in a vortex of liquid night. Ethan clutched his chest. "It is inside me again." The pull. Hawthorne raised the staff overhead. "Hold the boundary." Marcus's voice strained. "I am trying." The circle flickered. The floor split open, and the entity rose. Not fully, not entirely, but enough. A towering silhouette formed from the writhing mass, its edges shifting like torn fabric caught in a storm. Where its face should be was only a void, churning with dozens of whispering mouths. A chorus of dissonant tones filled the apartment. "Ethan!" The force of the voice struck him physically. He fell to his knees. Marcus pulled him back up. The runes pulsed, but cracked under the pressure. Hawthorne shouted, "Ethan, listen to me. You must resist the internal tether. Do not let it pull from within." "I cannot," he gasped. "It is too strong." "Yes, you can," Marcus yelled into his ear. "You have fought it every time. Fight now." The shadow figure extended a single, elongated arm toward the circle. The fingertips hovered inches beyond the barrier, leaving trails of frost in the air. Ethan felt the pull ripping through him like knives. The entity whispered again, "You are already mine." Ethan's vision blurred. His body tipped forward. "No," Marcus screamed, pulling him back. Hawthorne slammed the staff once more. A surge of white fire burst from the ground, striking the entity's arm and forcing it to retract. The shadow mass recoiled violently. The hour wavered. The clock flickered. 2:33 a.m. shifted to 2:34, then back, then blank, then finally darkness. All lights died. The entity retreated beneath the floor like a receding tide, dragging the shadows with it. Silence fell. The clock remained blank. Ethan collapsed completely. Marcus caught him, lowering him gently to the ground. Hawthorne stepped closer, breath heavy. His voice was grim. "The hour has broken its boundary. It is no longer tied to time. The final severing must happen soon, or Ethan will not survive the next surge." Ethan looked up weakly. "When?" Hawthorne's answer chilled the room. "When the hour returns. But next time, it will not wait for the clock to strike." The apartment no longer felt like a place Fixed in a reality, time had slipped away. The clock on the table remained blank, its hands resting motionless, as if refusing to acknowledge the existence of hours anymore. Ethan lay on the floor inside the containment circle, breathing shallowly, sweat and frost mixing on his skin. Marcus sat beside him, gripping his hand tightly, whispering reassurances he barely heard. Hawthorne stood before the cracked floorboards, his staff raised, his jaw tense. The silence in the room was not peace. It was pressure, a build-up, a breath held by something enormous beneath the surface of the world. Ethan finally spoke, voice trembling. If the hour broke from time, what does that even mean for us? Hawthorne turned slowly. It means the entity is no longer bound to the clock for manifestation. It can strike at any moment. The next breach will not wait for 2:33 a.m. It will choose the moment that most weakens you. Marcus cursed softly under his breath. So we could be hit again right now. Yes, Hawthorne said. Or in minutes, or hours. The final surge will come when the tether aligns naturally with Ethan's internal rhythm. Ethan stared at his hands. My internal rhythm. What does that mean? The tether is no longer external, Hawthorne explained. It is woven into your pulse, your emotions, your fear. When your mind wavers, when your breath stumbles, when you lose focus even slightly, that is when the hour can surface. Ethan felt his heart tighten. So it hunts my weakness. Precisely. A cold sweat dripped down his neck. The idea that the hour was no longer a time but a predator waiting for him to slip terrified him more than anything so far. Marcus tightened his grip on Ethan's hand. Well, good news is I am staying awake for the rest of my life. Ethan gave a faint, broken laugh before anything else could be said. The shadows twitched, not violently, not with force, but subtly. A small ripple moved across the wall. Ethan noticed immediately. Hawthorne's eyes sharpened. It is testing you again. Ethan swallowed hard. What do I do? Hold yourself, Hawthorne instructed. The tether responds to you, not the other way around. You must remain present. You must not drift. But Ethan did not know how to stop drifting. The exhaustion in his bones felt unbearable. Every muscle in his body screamed for rest. Every moment his eyes closed, he felt the whisper curling through his mind. Ethan, Ethan, Ethan. It no longer even pretended to hide. The shadows rippled again, this time forming shapes, thin branches stretching along the wall, curling toward the containment circle like skeletal fingers. Marcus stood up instantly. Back off, back off. The shadows froze. Ethan exhaled shakily. It listens to him. Hawthorne nodded. The entity is adapting to communication. Every reaction we show, it learns from. Great, Marcus muttered. So now it is learning our voices, our movements, our fear. Ethan's chest tightened again. He felt like a specimen under a microscope. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Time no longer made sense. Then something happened that none of them expected. A faint glow spread across the walls, subtle, ghostly. Ethan blinked, confused. Marcus stepped forward cautiously. What is that? Hawthorne approached slowly, lifting the staff's dim light. The glow moved like dust caught in sunlight, except there was no sunlight. It thickened, forming shapes. words. Ethan approached the wall with trembling steps, the glowing script twisted into a familiar shape. His handwriting. Marcus gasped. "That is, your writing." Ethan's throat closed. He reached out, but did not touch the glowing words. The sentence on the wall read, "I have always been waiting for you." Ethan fell back as if struck. His breath faltered. His heart hammered violently. "That is not me. I never wrote that. I never." The shadows pulsed. Hawthorne grabbed Ethan's shoulders. "Look at me. This is not memory. It is mimicry. It is using your mind. It is trying to weaken your sense of self." But Ethan felt the panic rising like a flood. What if the hour had been with him longer than he ever realized? What if it had been whispering inside his dreams, shaping his thoughts, waiting for the moment he became aware of it? He clutched his head. "I do not know what is mine anymore." Marcus knelt fast. "Hey, Ethan, listen. You are here. With us, with me. I know you. You are not its words." But the writing on the wall glowed brighter, this time forming a different sentence. "I am you." Ethan screamed and stumbled backward into the containment circle. His chest tightened sharply. The tether inside him pulsed violently. Hawthorne shouted, "Marcus, hold him." Marcus lunged, gripping Ethan's arms as he convulsed. The shadows bent inward, as if sniffing for weakness. Hawthorne raised the staff. "Ethan, you must breathe. You must remember your body. You must separate yourself from the tether." Ethan struggled to inhale. The shadows thickened. The writing on the wall warped, twisting into silhouettes. One of them looked like him. Marcus shook him. "Ethan, look at me. Ignore the shadows. Focus on your breath. Do not let it pull you inward." Ethan gasped, shaking. The tether surged again, burning through his chest. Then the ground trembled. A deep crack split across the floorboards, not from the hallway, not from beneath the bed, but from beneath the containment circle itself. Hawthorne recoiled. It is breaching from underneath him. It is targeting the circle's root. The chalk runes flickered. The metallic rods vibrated violently. Frost spiraled across the circle like vines. Ethan screamed, "It is inside me. I cannot. The shadow silhouettes swirled violently, merging into an elongated figure rising from the floor cracks. Its shape resembled Ethan, but taller, thinner. Wrong. Its head tilted unnaturally, its fingers elongated into shadow claws. Marcus raised the emitter. "Do not come closer." The figure ignored him. It leaned forward and whispered in Ethan's voice, "Come out!" The tether nearly snapped Ethan out of the circle. Marcus threw his entire weight backward, dragging Ethan to the center. The circle burst in bright light. Hawthorne struck the staff into the ground. The entity shrieked. The shadow Ethan figure dissolved violently as the light surged through the room. The cracks sealed. The runes reignited. But Ethan collapsed, sobbing. Marcus held him tightly. "It is okay. I got you. Hawthorne lowered the staff. Pale, his voice was strained. The entity is shifting strategy. Before, it tried to pull you. Now it tries to replace you. Ethan froze. "Replace me?" "Yeah," Hawthorne replied grimly. "It is wearing the shape of your mind. If it succeeds in completing the tether, the entity will not need to take your body. It will simply become you." The shadows along the walls pulsed once more, slow, rhythmic, patient. Hawthorne whispered, barely audible, and the next breach is coming faster than we can prepare. For a long time, no one in the apartment moved. The only sound was Ethan's broken breathing as he clutched Marcus's sleeve, his fingers trembling with exhaustion. The glowing runes around the containment circle dimmed into a faint pulse, like dying embers trying to hold on to their last warmth. Hawthorne stood tall, but even he looked shaken, eyes fixed on the place where the shadow Ethan had dissolved moments before. Ethan wiped his face with shaking hands, the memory of his own voice whispering from that twisted silhouette echoed in his skull like a bruise. It haunted him more deeply than the entity's roars ever had. The feeling of being copied of something studying him so perfectly that it could become him left him sick with dread. Marcus tightened his grip on Ethan's shoulders. "Talk to me, man. You are still you. You hear me?" Ethan nodded weakly, but the words on the wall, "I am," you still flickered behind his eyes. Hawthorne finally spoke, his voice steady but grave. "It has crossed a new threshold. Before, the entity tried to pull you. Now it is building identity inside your tether. If it manages to complete that reflection, the severing will be nearly impossible." Ethan swallowed hard. "So what happens if it becomes me completely?" Hawthorne looked straight at him. "Then the hour will not need your body. It will use your reflection as its anchor instead. The world will see you, hear you, but it will be the entity speaking." Ethan's stomach twisted. A copy of him walking the world. A hollow version. A shadow version. A doorway. He shook violently. Marcus helped him sit upright again. "We will not let that happen." But Ethan could not shake the terror building in his chest. The entity no longer felt like something outside him. It felt like something creeping forward from inside, step by step, each moment closer to taking his place. Before anyone could speak again, the entire apartment pulsed with deep vibration, like the building itself exhaled. Hawthorne spun toward the hallway. "Brace yourselves. It is forcing the moment forward again." The shadows on the walls shivered violently. The lights flickered once, twice, and then time lurched. The blank screen of the clock lit up suddenly. 2:14, then 2:25. The numbers jumped without rhythm, without sequence, like the entity was dragging time across some unseen surface. Ethan felt a sharp pain in his ankle. The mark pulsed so strongly it felt like a heartbeat under his skin. Marcus cursed. "It is skipping toward the hour." "It is not skipping," Hawthorne corrected. "It is selecting, choosing the next breach point." Ethan felt cold sweat drip down his spine. The hour was no longer counting time. It was stalking him. The numbers froze. The light flickered. Then the clock displayed a new time, 2:32 a.m. Ethan's breath caught. Marcus grabbed him. No, not yet." Hawthorne lifted the staff instantly. "Both of you into the circle now." They scrambled inside just as the runes ignited again. The metallic rods buzzed violently, vibrating with a pitch Ethan felt in his teeth. A deep crack echoed from the bedroom, sharp enough to shake dust from the ceiling. Then something stepped into the hallway, not slithering, not crawling, not bursting through the floor. Stepping, Ethan's entire body went cold. A silhouette emerged from the darkness, tall, elongated, but shaped like a person, except its proportions were wrong. its limbs too long, its movements too smooth, its head tilted at an unnatural angle as it stepped into the faint light. Marcus whispered, "Oh God, it is walking," Hawthorne hissed under his breath. "It is testing physical form." Ethan stared as the figure's legs, shadowy but structured, took another step and another. Each footfall made no sound, yet Ethan felt the vibration through the air. The figure stopped halfway down the hall, its head snapped toward him, and the voice that came out was not a whisper, it was his own voice. Ethan. Ethan staggered backward. His name reverberated through the containment circle, vibrating the runes. Marcus raised the emitter. You do not get to use his voice. But the figure ignored him. It stepped closer, the silhouette's features sharpened into something disturbingly familiar, his own outline, stretched by shadows, hollowed. Like someone carved him out of night, the entity spoke again. "Ethan, I know your breath." Ethan gasped and stumbled. Marcus caught him. "Do not listen to it." But the shadow Ethan continued stepping forward, moving closer, its form stabilizing more with each step. Hawthorne slammed the staff into the ground, sending a blast of white light down the hallway. The figure exploded into smoke, but instantly reformed. Ethan screamed, "It can rebuild itself." Hawthorne gritted his teeth. "It is learning physical laws, adapting to this plane." The shadow Ethan raised its head and stretched out a hand. "Ethan, come outside yourself." Marcus yanked Ethan back. "That is not even words that make sense. Stop listening." But Ethan could not stop. A cold pressure curled around his skull, around his heartbeat. The tether surged again, pulling like a hook in his chest. He felt something stepping forward inside him. Not physically, inside his mind. Hawthorne shouted, "Ethan, do not match its rhythm. Breathe off pattern. Now." Ethan tried. He inhaled sharply, deliberately breaking the pull. The entity snapped its head, and suddenly the hour struck. At 2:30 a.m. The clock flashed violently. The apartment split in two. Half of the room stayed real. The other half twisted, bending into a corridor of shadow long, deep, and lined with door frames that shuddered open and shut. Ethan screamed as the tether yanked him forward. Marcus and Hawthorne held him from both sides, dragging him back to the center of the circle. The shadow. Ethan stepped fully into the light, now its shape clearer than ever, its smile a hollow curve, its eyes pits of inverted reality. It raised its hand, and the real Ethan felt his own hand rise involuntarily. Marcus shouted, "Ethan, stop!" "I cannot," Ethan cried. "It is controlling my reflection." The entity whispered through his mouth. "I am you," Hawthorne roared, striking the staff down. "Circle ignite now." The runes burst in blinding white. A dome of light expanded outward, slamming the shadow Ethan backward. Its body fractured like smoke broken by wind, but it did not vanish. It reshaped, it condensed, and then it stepped through the floor, straight down, as though gravity itself no longer applied. Ethan collapsed, gasping. Marcus held him. "Ethan, what happened?" Hawthorne stared at the floor where the shadow vanished. "It is not attacking right now." Ethan trembled. "Then what is it doing?" Hawthorne answered with dread. "It is going to the place where the tether is strongest." Ethan whispered, "Where is that?" Hawthorne closed his eyes. Inside you, Ethan lay trembling inside the containment circle, his breath shallow as Marcus steadied him. Hawthorne stood motionless, eyes fixed on the floor where the shadow Ethan had vanished. The air in the apartment pulsed faintly, like a second heartbeat beneath the world. Every shadow trembled. Every corner felt deeper, stretched by something unseen. Ethan clutched his chest where the tether throbbed violently, as though something inside him had begun crawling toward the surface. Marcus whispered, "Ethan, stay with me. Hey, look at me." Ethan could barely hear him over the hum inside his skull. The entity had not spoken again, yet its presence wrapped around him like a cold serpent, waiting for the right moment to strike. Hawthorne finally broke the silence. It is not withdrawing, it is descending inward. The hour is inside you now. Ethan flinched. What does that even mean? Hawthorne stepped toward him, lowering his voice. Every breach has opened the doorway wider. Every surge has strengthened the tether. Now the entity no longer needs to approach from outside. It is burrowing through your reflection, through your thoughts, through your fear. Marcus's grip tightened. Great! So now it can show up wherever it wants. Inside him, Ethan swallowed hard. I can feel it, like something is moving under my ribs, like it is waiting for me to stop fighting. Hawthorne crouched beside him. That sensation will grow stronger. The next time the hour manifests, the entity will not simply try to drag you, it will try to emerge from within you fully. Ethan's heart hammered painfully. Emerge from me. Yes, you are the bridge now. The entity is shaping its doorway through you. Ethan nearly vomited at the thought. The idea of the hour opening through his body made him tremble so hard. Marcus had to steady him again. Suddenly, a deep vibration rolled through the building. Not from the floor, not from the walls, but from Ethan. He gasped, clutching his chest. It hurts. It is pulling inward. I can't. Hawthorne reacted instantly. Marcus, hold him. Now, Ethan convulsed as a wave of icy air blasted from his mouth, as if his breath were being dragged out of him. Shadows along the walls bent inward, like they were being inhaled by an unseen force around his body. Marcus shouted, "Ethan, breathe. You have to breathe." Ethan could not. Every inhale felt stolen, as if the air refused to enter his lungs. Then the lights flickered, the blank clock twitched, and time lurched forward. 2:28 a.m. Marcus swore loudly. It is starting again. Hawthorne lifted the staff. No, the hour is not here. This is the tether preparing the breach. Ethan screamed as the shadows thickened around him. He felt a shape pressing outward from his chest, as if something inside him struggled to stretch into form. He cried out, "It is inside me. It is trying to come out." Marcus held him tighter. "Fight it, Ethan, fight." But the shadow beneath him pulsed like a heartbeat. A cold wind spiraled upward, forming a twisting column of darkness around Ethan's body. Hawthorne slammed the staff into the floor. Containment ignite. The runes flared violently. The rods lit with piercing white. The shadow column shuddered, but did not break. Ethan gasped in agony. I see it inside my mind. It is standing in a doorway, waiting for me to step through. Hawthorne yelled, "Do not acknowledge it. Do not let it open the door. Ethan's vision blurred. He saw the corridor again, the impossible hallway lined with shifting doors that breathed like lungs. At the far end stood the silhouette of himself, the shadow self, the mirror that was not his reflection. It whispered in his voice, "Come home, Ethan." He shook violently. No, I am not you." The figure raised a hand, and Ethan felt his own fingers twitch in response. Marcus grabbed his hand. "Hey, look at me." "Not it, me. You are here. You are Ethan, not that thing." Ethan tried to anchor himself, but the corridor reached for him, stretching like a tunnel of living darkness. Then the clock jumped. 2:31 a.m. Hawthorne whispered under his breath, "Too early. Too early. The hour is accelerating beyond control." The apartment twisted as if gravity itself bent sideways. Doors warped, the windows elongated, the ceiling stretched upward, as if the room were being pulled into another dimension. Marcus shouted, "Hold him!" The tether yanked Ethan upward, his body lifting off the floor. Marcus and Hawthorne grabbed him, pulling him back down. The circle fought to contain the force, but cracks spread through the chalk like lightning. Ethan screamed as a shadowy hand pushed through his chest from inside, not tearing flesh, tearing reality. Marcus cried out, "Oh God, Hawthorne, it is coming through him." Hawthorne's voice thundered, "Ethan, you must reject it. Do not let its form stabilize. Do not become its doorway." Ethan squeezed his eyes shut. He saw the shadow self standing so close it nearly touched him. It whispered softly, "You do not have to fight. Just lean forward." Ethan sobbed, "No, I will not let you in. I will not let you become me." The shadow self tilted its head. "Then I will become you from beneath." Ethan felt a cold surge inside his spine. The tether burned like molten ice. Hawthorne roared, "Say it." "Say what?" Ethan gasped. "Say it does not belong to you. Say it now." Ethan choked on his own breath but forced the words out. "You are not me. You do not belong to me." The shadow corridor trembled. The figure flickered. Marcus shouted, "Keep going, man, keep going." Ethan screamed with everything he had, "You are not me. You are not me." The tether snapped like a cracking whip. The shadow hand retreated violently. The corridor collapsed inward like a tunnel imploding. Ethan fell back into Marcus's arms, sobbing. The apartment lurched. Then everything went dead still. The clock flickered. 2:33 a.m. Hawthorne's eyes widened. No, the hour is manifesting instantly. No build-up, no boundary. The shadows exploded into the living room with deafening force. The walls bent inward, like the room were inhaling. Ethan felt the tether surge again, trying to reopen the doorway inside him. Marcus yelled, "Hawthorne, do something." Hawthorne slammed the staff into the ground, unleashing a dome of white fire. The entity shrieked and recoiled, but the shriek came from inside Ethan's chest as well. Ethan clutched his sternum. "It is trying to open. It is trying to open inside me." Hawthorne's voice split the air. "Ethan, you must anchor yourself now. Think of something that is yours, something the entity cannot imitate. Ethan gasped. I do not know. Think, Marcus shouted. Anything, something real. Ethan searched desperately through his collapsing thoughts. The shadows clawed at him. The hour pressed inward. Then a memory surfaced. Marcus laughing in the kitchen 2 days ago, throwing popcorn at him while they argued about horror movies. Something stupid, something real, something entirely his. Ethan screamed, "That laugh, that moment, that is mine. You cannot take that." The tether recoiled sharply. A blast of light erupted from the circle. The shadows retreated screaming. The hour shattered. The clock went blank again. Ethan collapsed unconscious. Hawthorne knelt beside him, checking his breathing. Marcus whispered, "Is he alive?" Hawthorne nodded slowly. "But the entity will strike again soon, and next time the tether may open from a place he cannot close." Marcus swallowed hard. "Where?" Hawthorne looked at Ethan's chest where the shadows had tried to emerge. "Inside the heart." Ethan awoke with a violent gasp, his lungs burning as if he had been drowning beneath thick, icy water. He looked around wildly, unsure of how much time had passed, though time no longer had meaning. The clock remained blank. The walls pulsed faintly with a heartbeat he knew was not the building's. It was his, or worse, something inside him echoing through the room. Marcus was at his side instantly. "Ethan, hey, look at me. You are okay. You are back." Ethan clutched his chest where the shadow had tried to emerge. The skin felt cold, too cold, but underneath it, something throbbed with an unnatural pulse. He winced. Hawthorne stood a few steps away, gripping his staff tightly. His face was drawn, eyes shadowed with exhaustion and fear. Not for himself, for Ethan, for the tether that had nearly opened inside his heart. Ethan whispered, "What happened?" "I remember the explosion of light, and then everything went black." Marcus exchanged a look with Hawthorne. "You fought it off. Barely. You kept it from opening inside you, but it was close, man. Too close." Hawthorne approached slowly. "Ethan, look at me. The entity is adjusting. It understands that external breaches are failing, so it is restructuring the tether to open from within. If it succeeds, it will not need the hour. It will bring the hour into you." Ethan shivered violently. "Bring the hour into me? You mean I become the doorway?" "You already are," Hawthorne said quietly, "but only partially. The doorway is incomplete. The entity needs one final alignment. The heart is the center of the tether. If it opens there, the breach becomes permanent." Ethan felt sick. Marcus placed a reassuring hand on his back, but his own hand was trembling. Ethan looked up. "Please, tell me there is a way to stop it. Tell me this is not already decided." Hawthorne nodded once. "There is a way, but it is the most dangerous moment we will face yet. The final severing must happen when the entity is fully manifested through the tether, not attacking from outside, but pushing through you." Ethan's eyes widened. "You mean I have to let it get that close?" "No," Hawthorne corrected. "You have to survive it getting that close." Before Ethan could respond, a vibration rolled through the apartment. Slow, rhythmic, pounding, a heartbeat, but not from any human chest. The shadows along the walls pulsed. Marcus whispered, "Tell me that is not Ethan." Hawthorne shook his head grimly. No, that is the hour itself. It is sinking to him. It is nearly time. Ethan felt the pulse inside him respond to the one in the walls like two drums falling into perfect rhythm. The sensation was terrifying. He felt himself slipping, becoming something else's echo. He clutched the blanket around him. Do something, please do something. Hawthorne stepped forward. Ethan, listen to me. You must stay conscious of yourself. Every fear you let consume you strengthens the tether. Every memory you claim as yours weakens it. Ethan glanced at Marcus. His voice shook. Marcus, say something real, something that does not belong to the hour. Marcus nodded, voice cracking. The first night you moved in, you set the smoke alarm off, microwaving pasta. You did not even know that was possible. Ethan huffed a weak laugh despite himself. I forgot about that. The pulse inside him dimmed slightly, but then the apartment lights flared violently. The room shook. The shadows recoiled, then surged inward, filling every corner instantly. Hawthorne shouted, "Positions now!" Marcus grabbed Ethan's arm, pulling him into the containment circle. The runes ignited with dazzling white light, but flickered faster than before, as if struggling to maintain form. Hawthorne raised the staff high. The hour is pushing. Brace yourselves. The heartbeat in the walls grew louder, 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 until Ethan felt it in his teeth. The clock flashed suddenly, 2:33 a.m., and stayed there. The hour had chosen its moment. A scream of tearing metal echoed beneath the floor. The boards split open, not in cracks, but in clean, deliberate lines, like something carving its way upward. Frost burst outward. Ethan screamed, "It is inside me. It is pushing from every direction." Marcus tightened his grip. "Stay with me. Ethan, stay here." Ethan sobbed. "I am trying. I am trying. It hurts. It hurts so much." A shadow erupted from the floor, not in the shape of the entity, but in the shape of veins. Dark, twisting strands shot upward like roots seeking the surface. They wrapped around Ethan's ankles first, then crawled upward along his legs, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. Hawthorne slammed the staff forward. Containment flare now. The runes burst in blinding fire. The veins recoiled but did not vanish. Instead, they tightened. Ethan gasped as something icy coiled around his spine, pulling. Hawthorne shouted, "Ethan, fight it. Do not let it rise through your core." Ethan screamed, "I cannot. It is inside me." Marcus grabbed Ethan's shoulders. "Listen to me, Ethan. You are stronger than this. You have pushed it back every time. Every single time. You are not weak. You are not its vessel. Fight it." Ethan squeezed his eyes shut and forced a breath. The shadow veins reacted violently, snapping backward, then surging forward again. The apartment shook as if something enormous shifted beneath it. A low voice echoed, "Ethan." It was his voice again. Perfect, cold, hollow. The floor behind them split wider, revealing the silhouette of the shadow. Ethan climbing upward, shoulders first, head angled in that unnatural, broken tilt. Marcus shouted, "No, not again." Hawthorne slammed the staff a second time. White energy blasted the shadow figure, but it barely staggered. Ethan's chest burned. The tether throbbed like a second heartbeat. The shadow Ethan stepped fully into view. You cannot fight me, Ethan. You are a doorway. Doors open. That is what they do. Ethan screamed. Shut up. Do not talk like me. Do not use my voice. But the figure only smiled. Marcus stepped in front of him. You do not get to take him. You hear me? The shadow Ethan ignored Marcus entirely. It looked straight into Ethan's eyes and whispered, "The heart is ready." Ethan felt a sharp stab of pain inside his chest. He collapsed to his knees, clutching himself. Hawthorne roared, "Ethan, look at me." But Ethan could not. His vision blurred. The room warped. The walls folded inward, forming a spiraling tunnel of shadow around the containment circle. Marcus shouted, "Ethan, stay with us." Ethan tried to breathe, but each inhale felt stolen. The shadow figure extended its hand. Ethan felt his own hand lifting, rising to meet it. Marcus grabbed his wrist, stopping it inches from the edge of the circle. No, stay with me, Ethan. Stay, the shadow whispered. Come home. It is time. Ethan felt something snap in his chest. A dark shape pressed outward beneath his sternum, trying to emerge like before. He screamed. Hawthorne shouted, "Ethan, anchor yourself now." Ethan forced the words through gritted teeth. "I am not your doorway." The circle ignited. A violent shockwave blasted outward, knocking the shadow Ethan backward, shattering its shape into tendrils of smoke. The veins recoiled violently, retreating beneath the floor. The hour flickered. 2:33 a.m. blinked once, then went blank. Silence. The apartment sagged like a dying creature. Marcus caught Ethan before he collapsed. Hawthorne lowered his staff, trembling with exhaustion. Marcus whispered to Hawthorne, "Is he safe?" Hawthorne shook his head slowly. "No, the entity is not defeated. It has only retreated to strengthen itself." Marcus swallowed hard. Then when does the final strike happen? Hawthorne looked down at Ethan, pale and barely conscious. "When the hour returns, and next time Ethan will face it at the heart of the tether." Ethan whispered weakly, "What does that mean?" Hawthorne's voice was grim. "It means the hour will open inside you, and you must close it from within." Ethan drifted in and out of consciousness like a man caught between two oceans, one warm and familiar, the other icy and endless. The apartment around him felt distant, as though he were watching it from behind thick glass. When he finally opened his eyes fully, Marcus was still holding him upright. Exhaustion etched deep into his features. Hawthorne stood nearby, staff planted firmly against the trembling floor. Ethan whispered, "I cannot keep doing this." Marcus squeezed his shoulder gently. "You are still here. That means you can." But Ethan felt hollow, not empty, invaded. The tether inside him pulsed like a second heart, cold and mechanical. Each beat sent a small shock through his ribs. Hawthorne knelt in front of him. "Ethan, listen carefully. The entity is preparing for the final alignment. You must be ready before it strikes, or it will use your body as its exit point." Ethan stared at him hopelessly. "How am I supposed to be ready for that?" Hawthorne's voice remained calm. "By understanding the tether fully, by learning where it roots, how it pulls, how it hides. You cannot sever something you do not face directly." Ethan's stomach twisted. "Face it inside me." "Yes." Ethan wanted to scream. He wanted to run, but the truth was simple. There was nowhere left to run. The apartment trembled again, more subtly this time, as though something beneath the floor shifted. The shadows on the walls stretched slightly, their edges vibrating like plucked strings. Marcus stood, uneasy. It is moving again. It is not attacking, but it is definitely moving. Hawthorne nodded slowly. It is adjusting the boundary between its realm and ours. It will continue until the hour manifests fully. And then, he did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Ethan struggled to sit up straighter. What do we do now? Hawthorne placed a small metal box in front of him. It contained thin papers etched with ancient runes. These will help stabilize your consciousness when the tether tries to overwhelm you. They cannot sever it, but they can slow its influence. Use them only when your mind begins to slip. Ethan picked up one of the strips. It hummed faintly in his hand like a small heartbeat. Then Marcus said, "Ethan, look." Ethan turned slowly toward the far wall. The plaster was bending, not breaking, not cracking, bending inward, as if something behind the wall were breathing. Ethan felt his pulse stutter. It is inside the walls now. Hawthorne's face tightened. No, it is inside you, and the walls echo what you feel. This room is becoming a reflection of your internal state, Marcus whispered. This whole place is turning into him. The wall pulsed again, then the ceiling, then the floor. Ethan felt the tether inside him sink with the movement. His vision blurred, and he gripped the edges of the containment circle. Hawthorne placed both hands on Ethan's temples and spoke with firm authority. Do not drift. Stay here. Stay in yourself. When the tether reaches your mind fully, the entity will try to replace you again. Ethan forced himself to breathe, but the room swayed with each pulse. He saw the shadow corridor flicker behind his eyelids. He saw the silhouette of his other self waiting at the far end, whispering. Soon, Ethan shook violently. Marcus grabbed him. "Hey, stay with us. Do not let it in. Do not even let it speak." But the whisper came anyway. Ethan, his name echoed from everywhere inside the walls, inside the floor, inside his chest. He clutched his sternum as cold pain shot through it. Hawthorne pulled him upright. "Fight it. Focus on something real, something only you know." Ethan tried, but the whisper grew louder. "I am ready to enter." The room dimmed. The runes flickered. The rods buzzed loudly. Marcus looked at Hawthorne with panic. It is happening again. It is trying to align again. Hawthorne lifted the staff. "Ethan, you must resist the internal pull, or it will complete the alignment from within your heart." The pulse inside Ethan throbbed violently, as if the entity hammered against his ribs. Ethan gasped, "Stop, stop, please stop." The shadows swelled around the containment circle. The lights snapped out. The clock flickered to life. 2:33 a.m. Marcus shouted already. No build-up this time. No warning. Hawthorne slammed his staff into the floor. "Hold him, Ethan. Hold your mind." The shadows collapsed inward like a tidal wave. Ethan screamed as the tether surged through him, lifting him off the floor. Marcus grabbed his arms. Hawthorne pressed a rune strip to Ethan's forehead. A burst of white light pulsed. The shadow wave recoiled, but the tether did not weaken. Instead, Ethan felt something new, something horrifying, a shape pressing outward from his spine, slowly, deliberately, a hand inside him, trying to break through. Ethan shrieked, "Get it off, get it out." Marcus grabbed him tighter. Hawthorne shouted, "Ethan, it is not physical, it is metaphorical. Reject its presence." But the pain was too real. Ethan felt fingers scraping along the inside of his ribs. His vision blurred into streaks of shadow. He heard the entity whispering directly into his heartbeat. "Let me in," Ethan sobbed. I cannot. "Yes, you can," Marcus roared. "Fight it, Ethan. Fight, or it wins." Ethan clenched his teeth so hard his jaw ached. His mind spun. Images flashed. The first night he saw movement under the bed. The first whisper. The first pull at 2:33 a.m. The shadow in the hallway. The mimic of his voice. The silhouette that wore his shape. All of it building toward this moment. He screamed with everything inside him, "You do not belong to me." The tether snapped like a whip. A burst of blinding light erupted from Ethan's body. The hand retreated inward violently. The shadows recoiled. The hour flickered. 2:33 a.m. blinked. Then the apartment fell silent. Ethan collapsed into Marcus's arms, trembling uncontrollably. Hawthorne knelt beside him, pale with shock. Marcus whispered, "Is it over? Did he stop it?" Hawthorne shook his head slowly. "No." He resisted the breach, but the tether is nearly complete. The entity is preparing for its final emergence. Marcus swallowed hard. "So what now?" Hawthorne rose to his feet, eyes grim. "Now we prepare for the severing, the real one. The final battle will not be the entity trying to enter this world." Marcus stiffened. "Then what?" Hawthorne looked down at Ethan with sorrow. "It will be Ethan entering the hour." Ethan opened his eyes weakly. "I have to go in." Hawthorne nodded. "The only way to sever the tether completely is from the inside. You must enter the hour itself." Marcus whispered, horrified. "He will not survive that." Hawthorne whispered softly. "He must." Ethan sat upright. Only because Marcus held him there, his body too exhausted and too shaken to support itself. His breath trembled with each inhale, shallow and unsteady, as though the very air resisted entering his lungs. The room around him pulsed gently, responding to the rhythm inside his chest. Every shadow on the wall seemed to deepen, as if bowing toward an unseen presence, waiting for its turn to rise. Hawthorne moved slowly, deliberately, placing his tools in a perfect line as if preparing for surgery. His face carried a weight Ethan had never seen before, something far beyond fear. It looked like grief masked by duty. Ethan swallowed painfully. "I have to go in, don't I?" Hawthorne nodded. "Yes, the hour will no longer open on its own. The tether inside you has absorbed too much of its presence. The breach must come from within." Marcus looked between them, horrified. "You are both talking like this is normal, like this is something he can actually do without dying." Hawthorne did not look at Marcus. "He cannot sever the tether from here. The entity resides in the deepest chamber of the hour. If Ethan does not confront it there the moment the tether stabilizes, it will emerge through him into our world." Marcus snapped, That is not a choice. That is suicide. Ethan stared at the floor. His heart burned with an icy pulse. Hawthorne turned to Ethan. The hour is not a place in the way we know places. It is a moment stretched into a realm. The inside of the fracture, the architecture of fear. If you enter it, you will not walk. You will not breathe the same. The rules of our world will not apply. It will attack you with memory, with reflection, with versions of you that never existed. Marcus clenched his fists. So what you are saying is, everything in there will try to kill him. No, Hawthorne corrected softly. Everything in there will try to become him. Ethan's stomach twisted. His chest ached. He lowered his head. And if I don't go, then the hour opens inside you, Hawthorne said gently. And when it does, the entity will step through your heart into this world. The silence that followed felt suffocating. Finally, Ethan whispered, "Then I go." Marcus's voice broke. "Ethan, no, you don't have to do this." Ethan forced himself to look at Marcus. His voice trembled but carried a strange clarity. "If I don't go, the entity comes here. It takes me anyway. But if I go in, maybe I can stop it." Hawthorne stepped closer and placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You will not go alone. Marcus and I will hold the connection from this side. We will anchor you as best as we can. The final severing requires 3 forces: the entity, the tether, and your will. You are stronger than you think." Ethan wasn't sure he believed that, but he nodded. Hawthorne raised the staff. The runes along its length glowed faintly. The containment circle pulsed beneath Ethan's legs. Marcus asked quietly, "How does he enter the hour? Does he just close his eyes?" Hawthorne shook his head. "No, he must open the doorway from inside the tether. Ethan must invite the hour, but on his own terms, not through fear, not through panic, but through intention." Marcus frowned. How the hell is he supposed to control something that has been torturing him for days? Hawthorne's expression softened. "Because the tether cannot override conscious will. Fear opens the door for the entity. Intention opens the door for Ethan." Ethan whispered, "So how do I do it?" Hawthorne held out a small metal token inscribed with runes. "This will suppress the entity's influence for a moment, just long enough for you to open the doorway yourself. When you feel the tether pull, you lean into it, but do not let the entity guide the moment. Shape it, direct it, enter the hour by your own will." Ethan held the cold metal token. It vibrated gently, like a heartbeat trying to sync with his. Then the room darkened. No lights flickered. No shadows moved. The darkness simply appeared, thick and silent, as if a curtain had descended over reality. Marcus whispered, "What is happening?" Hawthorne's face went pale. "The hour senses what we are preparing. It is watching." Ethan felt it too. A presence curled around his spine, warm and cold, familiar and alien. His pulse stuttered. The clock flickered. 200 a.m., then 2:03, then 2:18. Time jumped like a skipping record. The entity was listening. Hawthorne raised his staff. "Ethan, now, before it chooses the moment for you, open the doorway while you still have control." Ethan clutched the token tightly. His breath shook. He whispered, I am not afraid of you." The tether pulsed. Marcus held him tighter. "Ethan, whatever you do, do not let go." Ethan closed his eyes. Darkness swirled behind his eyelids. The corridor appeared almost instantly. A long hallway of shifting walls lined with breathing door frames. At the far end stood the silhouette of himself, the shadow Ethan, still as a statue, its head tilted, its hands at its sides. It whispered without moving its mouth, "Come home, Ethan." Ethan forced his voice to remain steady. "I am the one opening the door, not you." The silhouette twitched. The hour pulsed. A doorway appeared before Ethan, not behind the shadow figure, not at the far end of the hall, but directly beside him. A dark rectangular outline burned into the air like a wound. Ethan felt the tether tighten around his ribs. Marcus shouted, "Ethan, something is happening, hold on." But Ethan barely heard him. The doorway pulsed. Then it inhaled, and Ethan felt himself pulled forward, not by force, not by fear, but by choice. He whispered, "I am going in." The doorway yawned open. The apartment vanished. The corridor swallowed him, and Ethan stepped into the hour. The moment he crossed the threshold, everything shifted. Gravity folded inward. The walls breathed. The floor pulsed like flesh. His own shadow rose from the ground, detaching itself and walking beside him like a silent twin. Voices whispered his name, not one, not two, but hundreds, all in his exact voice. "Ethan, Ethan, Ethan, Ethan." He felt his heartbeat in the air around him. He felt the tether like a rope dragging behind him, and ahead, something enormous waited, a chamber pulsing like the inside of a colossal heart. The source of the tether, the entity, a shape moved in the center of the chamber. Tall, twisted, rippling with layers of darkness like oil on water. Multiple faces surfaced along its surface. Some Ethan recognized as his own, but warped, stretched, smiling too wide. One face leaned forward and whispered, "Welcome to yourself." Ethan's breath shook violently, but he stepped forward, because this time the hour had not taken him. He had come for it. The first step Ethan took into the heart chamber felt like stepping into another version of himself, one made of shadow, breath, and memory. The air inside the hour was thick, not like fog, but like a living presence pressing against his skin. The ground rippled under his feet as if he walked on stretched muscle. The walls pulsed in slow rhythm, expanding and contracting like lungs, keeping time with his trembling heartbeat. Behind him, the doorway closed without a sound. Ethan did not turn around. He knew instinctively that looking back would only disorient him, or worse, pull him out of the fragile clarity he still possessed. He needed to move forward. The chamber was massive, stretching far beyond the size of any real room. This was not a building. This was the interior of the tether made physical, a vast cavern carved from the space beneath time. At the center of the chamber, the entity waited. It towered above the ground like a shifting monolith of shadow, its surface rippling with images and fragments that flickered like reflections on black water. Ethan saw pieces of himself in those reflections. his face, but stretched in unnatural ways, his posture, but broken at strange angles, his voice whispering words he never spoke. He forced himself to breathe. The sound of his own thoughts needed to be louder than the whispers. "You came," the entity said, though its mouth did not move. The words formed directly inside Ethan's mind, echoing like overlapping versions of his own voice. Ethan stepped forward. "I did, because I choose to." The entity tilted slightly, its form bending as if curious. "Choice is an illusion. The tether brought you here. I brought you here." Ethan shook his head. "You only pulled. I walked." The walls pulsed harder. The chamber darkened around him. The entity shifted into a new shape. A taller version of Ethan with elongated limbs and a blank spiral where the face should be. "You cannot sever what you are," the entity whispered. "I am inside your breath, inside your pulse, inside your fear. I am the hour behind your heartbeat." Ethan felt a wave of cold sweep over him. He clutched the rune token Hawthorne gave him. It buzzed faintly and steadied his thoughts. "No," he said, "you are not me. You only copy me. There is a difference." The entity split down the center like fabric tearing. From within its form, another version of Ethan stepped out, this one wearing his exact appearance, down to the smallest detail. It even breathed the same. The two versions looked at each other. "Which am I, Ethan?" the copy said. "Tell me." Ethan froze. The mimic walked closer, its movements perfectly synchronized with his heartbeat. It tilted its head the same way he did. It smiled exactly the way he did in photographs. The voice was flawless. "I am you. You are me. We are the doorway." Ethan stepped backward. His own face felt unfamiliar. "No, you are a reflection, a shapeshift, a lie wearing my skin." The mimic's face twisted. "Then what are you?" The entity around them pulsed violently. The chamber darkened and then burst into light, revealing dozens of versions of Ethan lining the walls, some twisted, some broken, some smiling too widely, some staring with hollow eyes. A chorus of voices echoed, all speaking in his tone, all overlapping. "We are you. We are everything you fear you could become." Ethan stumbled. He felt his knees weaken as the walls bent inward, warping into spirals. Then a memory flashed unbidden. Marcus shouting his name, Marcus's hand gripping his arm, Marcus telling him he was stronger than he believed. Ethan inhaled sharply. "That is what is mine. That memory. You cannot take it." The dozens of mimic figures froze. The central entity growled a low sound that shook the ground. Ethan's voice grew steadier. "I do not belong to the hour. I am not your mirror. I am not your vessel." The mimic's skin cracked like shattered glass. A scream echoed through the chamber. The entity stepped forward, shedding its illusions. Now it appeared as a swirling mass of tendrils, eyes, mouths, and shifting reflections. It towered over Ethan, massive enough to fill the entire ceiling. Then the entity opened, not like a mouth, not like a doorway. It opened like a wound. A deep rupture in its center revealed a vortex swirling with endless dark corridors. Ethan saw glimpses of beds shifting in the night of hallways that stretched forever, of clocks frozen at 2:33, of mirrors showing versions of him he had never been. "This is the core of the tether," the entity roared. "This is your heart. This is your hour." A tendril shot toward Ethan, wrapping around his ankle. The temperature plummeted. Ethan screamed as the force dragged him forward toward the vortex. His body scraped across the living floor. Tendrils wrapped around his wrists, pulling. More tendrils spiraled from beneath him, curling around his ribs like constricting snakes. The entity whispered inside his mind, "Come home, Ethan." He struggled, but the force was overwhelming. He felt his body slowly lifting toward the open wound. Then he heard it, a faint sound, a vibration. Marcus's voice, distant, muffled, but real. "Ethan, Ethan, hold on. We are here. Hold on." Ethan gasped, tears filling his eyes. "Marcus is my anchor. I am not alone." He clutched the rune token. It burned white hot in his palm. A burst of light erupted from his hand, blasting outward. The tendrils recoiled, screaming. The vortex flickered violently. The chamber trembled. The walls shrieked like living flesh torn open. Ethan forced himself to stand, though his legs trembled violently. He faced the entity. "You do not own my fear," he said. "You do not own my voice. You do not own me." The entity roared, shaking the entire chamber. Its form cracked. Tendrils lashed wildly. Ethan stepped closer. "I came here because I choose to. I walk out because I choose to. Now get out of me." He thrust the rune token into the center of the tether wound. The chamber erupted. Light consumed everything. The entity screamed 1,000 overlapping voices. The floor shattered. The walls exploded outward. The vortex collapsed in on itself with a deafening implosion. Then silence. Darkness. Ethan fell backward into nothing. He was weightless, suspended, floating between worlds. Then, a single breath, a single heartbeat, a voice whispering in the dark, "Ethan, come back." "Marcus." Ethan reached toward the voice and began to rise. Ethan drifted upward through darkness that felt too thin to be real. A membrane stretched between two worlds. Each second he floated felt like an hour, yet no time passed at all. The shadows clung to him like cold cloth, pulling and releasing, as though unsure whether to keep him or surrender him. He felt weightless and heavy all at once, suspended in a place where direction meant nothing. A faint pulse echoed through the void. Marcus's voice faded in and out like a memory wrapped in fog. "Ethan, you are almost here. Just reach for me." Ethan reached into the dark, fingers brushing something warm, then missing it. His stomach twisted. He began falling instead of rising. The dark swallowed him whole. The chamber was gone. The vortex was gone. But the hour was not finished with him. The void thickened around him until he felt himself pass through something like a thin wall. Suddenly he stood on a surface. It stretched endlessly in every direction, flat, glossy, black, reflecting distorted images of himself across its surface. Some reflections were delayed. Others moved ahead of him. Others did not move at all. Ethan whispered, Where am I? A reflection spoke, though he had not. Home, the reflection said. Its voice did not echo. It landed inside Ethan's skull like a cold drop of water. This is where ours come from. This is the surface where memories arrange themselves. Ethan's pulse quickened. He stepped backward, but his reflection did not. Instead, it smiled. You cannot leave until you understand what you are. Ethan shook his head. I know exactly what I am. I am not you. All the reflections, dozens forming around him, tilted their heads in perfect unison. Then they whispered the same sentence. You are the hour. The ground pulsed, and the surface broke like glass. Ethan fell through cracks that were not cracks, but windows into moments of his life. He saw himself as a child running from shadows under his bed. He saw his teenage years flinching at nightmares he never understood. He saw the first night he heard scratching beneath the mattress. He saw himself at the exact moment the tether touched him for the first time. A whisper curled around these memories. You were chosen because you were already open. Ethan screamed. No, I was attacked. I was targeted. The voice laughed without sound. You cannot target what already beckons. He fell faster. The memories shattered around him. Then another chamber caught him. This one was narrower, shaped like a long tunnel with ribs arching along the sides, like the inside of a creature's throat. He landed hard. The breath knocked out of him. The floor pulsed with the same cold heartbeat he felt in his own chest. Something moved in the distance. A scraping sound, a crawling sound, a whispering sound. Ethan forced himself to stand. His legs shook violently. He reached for the rune token, but it flickered weakly in his hand, dimming like a dying ember. He clenched it anyway. A shape approached from the far end of the tunnel. Not the entity, not the mimic, something smaller. Bent, shivering, its limbs were too thin, like sticks bound in the wrong places. It crawled with its chest dragging along the floor. As it drew closer, Ethan's breath caught in his throat. It was him, but young, a child, 7 years old, eyes wide with terror, dragging himself forward, whispering, Ethan, help me, please, Ethan. Ethan staggered backward. This is not real. That is not me. The child crawled closer, its face twisting with fear. You left me alone in the dark, Ethan. You left me under the bed. You left me with it. Ethan trembled. The world bent around him. His vision doubled. This was a memory. This was a lie. This was both. Ethan knelt gently. I did not leave you. You are not real. You are not me. You are fear pretending to have a face. The child's expression collapsed into something hollow. Then its mouth opened sideways. The face stretched, the eyes inverted, and the child's voice merged with something far deeper. Then fear is all you are. The child exploded into shadows that surged upward, wrapping around Ethan's neck. Ethan choked, falling backward as the shadows constricted. He clawed at them, but they tightened harder, pulsing with dark rhythm. The tether inside Ethan throbbed violently, responding to the attack. He felt his chest cave inward. His lungs burned. Then Marcus's voice cut through the dark like a blade. Ethan, breathe. We can feel you slipping. Fight it. Ethan gasped, the shadows loosening slightly. "Marcus, Marcus, I am here." "Yes," Marcus shouted through the void, "and we are pulling you back. Do not let it rewrite you." Ethan clutched the rune token, pressing it to his chest. Light burst outward, struggling through the shadows. The dark recoiled, hissing. Ethan inhaled sharply as the grip loosened. The tunnel around him shuddered. The shadows retreated but did not vanish. Instead, they rearranged themselves into a shape Ethan dreaded to see. The mimic, but not just one. Dozens, each one wearing in his face, each one whispering, "You cannot sever what you are." Ethan staggered backwards. "Get away from me!" The mimics advanced in perfect unity, their steps silent, their faces shifting between emotionless and agonized. "You do not belong in the hour," they whispered. "The hour belongs in you." Ethan's heart pounded, his vision blurred. For a moment, he could not remember the apartment. He could not remember Marcus. He could not remember his name. Then a spark, a single clear note. Marcus laughing in the kitchen, throwing popcorn at him. Hawthorne muttering about burnt rune chalk. A stupid argument about horror movies. A real memory. His memory, not theirs. Ethan roared. "Stop taking my face." He slammed the rune token into the ground. The floor erupted in white fire. All the mimics were flung backward, screaming in overlapping versions of his own voice. The tunnel cracked open, the ceiling shattering into fragments of shadow. Light poured through. Ethan shielded his eyes as reality bent around him. The tunnel fell away beneath his feet, and he rose again, floating upward through the broken chamber. He drifted through layers of shadow and light, each one peeling away like pages of a book. Then he saw it. The real tether, not the illusion in the chamber, not the vortex. This was the core, a long, twisting root of pure shadow pulsing through a void of endless depth. It connected him to the entity on one end and to the world on the other. The tether was alive, thrumming like a living organ. Ethan floated before it weightless. He whispered, "This is what must break." The tether responded. A deep pulse exploded through the void. The entity's voice thundered from everywhere at once. "Ethan," he screamed, clutching his ears. The tether writhed, pulling him toward it like a massive vein trying to swallow him whole. Marcus's voice broke through, faint but desperate. "Ethan, do not touch the tether, not yet. We are pulling you out. Just hold on." Ethan reached toward the sound. He felt Marcus's presence like a warm thread. He grabbed onto it. The tether snapped toward him. Shadows exploded outward. The void cracked, and Ethan shot upward like a bullet through water. Light blinded him. Air rushed into his lungs. He collapsed into a pair of arms. "Marcus," Ethan gasped. "Marcus, I saw it. I saw the tether. It is alive. It knows my name." Marcus held him tightly, shaking with fear and relief. "Ethan, you are back. You came back." Hawthorne knelt beside them, pale, shaken. "Ethan, what you saw confirms everything. The final severing is possible. But there is one more step," Ethan whispered weakly. "What step?" Hawthorne met his eyes with grim certainty. "You must cut the tether at the source, and that means going back one last time." Ethan closed his eyes. The hour was not finished, and neither was he. Ethan sat on the apartment floor with his back against the trembling wall, his breath shallow and uneven. Everything inside him felt stretched thin. like threads pulled to their breaking point. Marcus knelt beside him, gripping his shoulder with both hands, as if anchoring him to the world by sheer will. Hawthorne stood before them, his staff glowing faintly with weak light. The air in the apartment felt wrong too, still, too heavy, too expectant. Shadows clung to the corners, like creatures waiting for permission to move. The clock remained blank, but the walls pulsed with faint, dim light, marking the slow rhythm of the tether deep inside Ethan's chest. Hawthorne spoke quietly. "Ethan, you saw the tether. You touched the hour's core. You survived. That means the severing can be done." Ethan nodded slowly, but the memory of the void and the living tether pulsing like a monstrous root made his stomach twist. He raised a trembling hand to his sternum, where the coldness had settled deep inside him. "I do not know if I can do it again. It nearly consumed me." Marcus's grip tightened. "You can. You came back. You fought it every step, even when it tried to rewrite you. That is strength. And you are not going back alone this time." Hawthorne lowered the staff. "Marcus is right. The first entry was the entity's realm shaping itself around your mind. But now you know what waits inside. You have something it does not expect." Ethan frowned. "What?" Hawthorne looked directly into his eyes. "Intent. You go in. Not because the hour pulls you, but because you choose to end it. That difference means everything." Ethan swallowed hard. The tether pulsed painfully inside him. The apartment dimmed slightly. The walls bent inward. The shadows along the floor thickened. Marcus whispered, "It is coming back. The hour knows we are preparing." Hawthorne raised the staff. "We must begin." The containment circle flared faintly, though it flickered each time Ethan inhaled. The runes around the floor shifted like lines drawn in sand about to be washed away. Hawthorne said, "Ethan, you must enter at your strongest moment, not your weakest. Find something that is yours, something the hour has never touched." Ethan closed his eyes and breathed. A moment came to him unbidden. Marcus sitting with him during a storm when he'd been too anxious to sleep. They had talked for hours about nothing and everything. It was simple, human, real. Ethan whispered, "That memory is mine." The tether inside him recoiled slightly as though burned. "Good," Hawthorne said. "Hold that." The apartment shook. The ceiling flickered like a dying fluorescent light. A cold wind burst from beneath the bed, pushing outward in a slow, invisible wave. Marcus said, "It is starting." "Ethan, hold on to me." Ethan squeezed Marcus's hand. "I am ready." The clock blinked once, then again. 2:33 a.m. The number did not flash. It did not flicker. It simply appeared, as though it had been waiting for them to catch up. The room collapsed, not physically but in perception. The walls bent outward and melted into long, dark corridors. The ceiling dissolved into swirling shadow. The floor split into thin layers like pages in a book. Ethan felt his body lift from the ground, though Marcus still held his hand. Light gathered around the containment circle, forming a pale dome around all three men. Hawthorne shouted, "Ethan, the doorway will open inside your chest. Follow it inward. Do not let the entity guide you. The tether surged. Ethan gasped as pain tore through him. His vision split into 2, then 3 as shadow layers peeled away from his sight. A doorway appeared inside his mind, a perfect black rectangle. He reached toward it. The hour inhaled, and Ethan fell inward. Darkness swallowed him again, but this time he moved with purpose, his will cutting through the void like a thin beam of light. The tether appeared far below him, stretching like a colossal spine through the empty world. Ethan fell toward it, landing softly on a shifting platform of shadow. The tether pulsed violently, the beat echoing inside his ribs. A voice thundered from everywhere. Ethan! The entity emerged from the void, coalescing into its true form, towering over the tether. It shed illusions, no more mimic bodies, no more human silhouettes. It was a swirling mass of layered darkness, with countless distorted faces drifting across its surface, each one whispering words he once feared. "You cannot break me," the entity roared. "You are made of me. You were born in shadow. Your fear created the hour." Ethan stepped forward, despite the fear freezing his spine. "You are wrong. My fear did not create anything. You fed on it. You copied it, but it was never yours to own." The entity surged forward, slamming tendrils into the ground, sending shockwaves through the void. Ethan staggered, but remained standing. The swirling faces screamed, "You cannot sever what binds us." Ethan looked down at the tether pulsing beneath him. He knew what he had to do. "I am not severing what binds us," he said. "I am severing what binds you." The tether writhed violently. The entity screeched, "You do not know what you will unleash." Ethan glanced into the shifting void around him. "I unleash myself." He lifted the glowing rune token. It pulsed with light from his memory. Marcus's laugh, their conversation during the storm, his own heartbeat that belonged to him, not the hour. The entity lunged forward. Too slow, Ethan thrust the rune token into the tether. The world exploded. A blinding white eruption tore through the hour, splitting the void into fragments. The tether shrieked like a living creature cut open. The walls of darkness shattered like brittle bone. Ethan felt himself falling backward as the tether snapped, completely severed at the core. The entity's scream filled the hour, 1,000 layered voices screaming his name as if calling him back to die with it. "Ethan, Ethan, Ethan." The hour imploded inward, collapsing like a punctured lung. Ethan felt the force pulling him downward. The darkness clawed at him, trying to drag him into the center, where everything folded into nothing. He reached outward blindly. Marcus's voice pierced the collapsing whirl. "Ethan, reach for me, reach." Ethan stretched his hand into the blinding white. A hand grabbed his, warm, real. "Marcus!" Hawthorne's voice shouted through the collapsing void. "Pull him through now." The light swallowed everything. Then air, cold air. Ethan gasped violently as his body collapsed onto the apartment floor. Marcus held him with both arms, shaking with relief. Hawthorne stood above them, trembling, gripping his staff tightly. The room returned slowly, piece by piece, the shadows crawling back into corners where they belonged. The clock was blank, silent, harmless. Ethan looked down at his chest. The cold pulse was gone. Hawthorne exhaled shakily. The tether is severed. The hour can no longer reach you. Marcus buried his face in Ethan's shoulder, whispering, "You did it. You really did it." Ethan closed his eyes, tears sliding silently down his cheeks. "It is over," he whispered. But Hawthorne shook his head slowly. "No, Ethan, it is over for you, but the hour is not gone. It drifts now, severed from its anchor, searching for a new doorway." Ethan's breath caught. Marcus looked up sharply. "You mean it can still reach someone else?" "Yes," Hawthorne said quietly. "Someone open, someone afraid at the wrong moment. The hour always returns." Ethan sat up slowly. His voice was soft. "Then we warn people. We tell them." Hawthorne nodded. "We will." Ethan stood unsteadily, Marcus supporting him. He looked toward the bed. For the first time since this began, nothing moved beneath it. No whisper, no scratching, no breathing. He exhaled long and slow, but deep inside the dark, something very far away whispered, 2:33 a.m. is never closed. And somewhere in the world, a clock blinked awake. The story ends here. Thank you for watching and listening to the whole story. Please subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell to listen to the next stories.